Hey, what's happening, everyone? Welcome to the program. It is the 9th of July, and we are here to talk about video games here on The Jeff Gerstmann Show. It's a podcast about video games. This week's edition is hosted by myself. It's me. My name is Jeff Gerstmann. Welcome to the broadcast. All right. Well, oh my gosh. I'm wiped out. I had to go for actual, real, full-bodied, full fat, full regular Red Bull today. I needed the real deal to private. It was a long, weird night, you know. These kids. That's all. Oh, these kids. Sometimes they don't want to sleep. And who can blame them, honestly? There's so much to do and see. And so why wouldn't you wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning? That's what I say. Get an early start of it. You know? So it's been going great. I have been playing a handful of video games. The one I'm like most. Oh man. We'll touch on this one quickly because the other ones, I think, well, one of the other ones is going to take a lot longer to discuss. But Daffodil, the creator of Street Uni X, got in. It was in chat while I was streaming some of that, and mentioned what I view to be a little known PlayStation 2 game that only came out in Europe, known as Rolling. And it is an inline skating game in the kind of, you know, Tony Hawk, aggressive inline, Dave Mirra mold. The extreme sports genre of that we all know and love. And I have been playing that at a nice 50 hertz because it's a yes, I believe it is. It's running, yes, at 50. It is. Some other PAL games will let you select, like, hey, do you want to try NTSC on this? Like a PAL 60 kind of, you know, what do you got over there? This one's like, nah, son. But that's what the variable refresh rate is for. So you can play your games at 50 frames per second instead of 60 without any weird tearing or anything like that, right? I mean, that's the whole point. When they invented G-Sync, they were like, finally, you're going to be able to play British PlayStation 2 games on a modern computer, and it's not going to look all weird. and bless them for it. Rolling is pretty good. I'm really surprised. Like it's a game that I believe it is. I believe it is published by 505. Which was a budget, you know, 505 published Control. Like 505 is kind of come and gone in some big weird ways over the years. But back then they were largely known as. Oh no, well, hang on a second. Actually, maybe I'm getting my games wrong. No, SCI, Sales Curve Interactive published this one. Rage Software developed this. So, you know, developed in the United Kingdom. Liverpool. What else did Rage do? There's a game that I associate with Rage Software. Incoming. They did Incoming. Remember the big graphics card demo game Incoming, where you were just a static turret? It came out on Dreamcast also, but I remember it as like a good showcase of like like a Voodoo 2 card or something. Where you were like a static turret and you were shooting things out of the sky. And it looked nice at the time. Anyway, they also developed this game called Rolling, which is an inline skating game running on the Renderware engine. Like it looks pretty nice. It handles pretty well. It's very straightforward, but like at the same time, the idea that there's like another one of these games out there that is okay to good that I haven't played is super exciting because it's like, oh man, this is great. I've finished aggressive inline 4 or 5 times over the years, and I don't know how many times I've played through the kind of the Tony Hawk campaigns from the from the first 4, games in that series. So it was nice to have a good throwback to that. So, again, thanks to Daffodil for pointing that out. And Daffodil's the developer behind Street Uni X, which is rad. That game's rad. Streamed some of that last week. That's up on YouTube if you want to catch some of it. And that's out on PC. Why don't we take a quick break? I'm not going to call it an existential crisis because it's not that deep, but I have been spending a lot of time thinking about not playing, and now more recently thinking about playing the First Descendant. And I'm in a weird place with video games. Let's take a break. I'll come back and hopefully explain. Hey, are you looking to sell stuff online? It can seem a little daunting, right? You're thinking in the back of your head, like, okay, I gotta build a website. I gotta figure out who's gonna handle all the payment processing, and well, what about all the security? No. There's a better way. You don't need to mess around with all of that other stuff. You don't need to roll your own. Whether you're selling a little bit or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing. And that thing is selling stuff. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. That's like, hey, are you just getting off the ground and launching a shop for the very first time? Is it your first time selling stuff online? Are you doing millions in orders? Every stage in the process, Shopify is there to help you grow and to take a load off your mind. You don't have to worry about building and maintaining all of that stuff yourself. Shopify handles all of that for you, no matter what you're selling. What are you selling, like scented soaps or something? You got outdoor outfits, water, toys, breakdancing videotapes. Whatever you've got, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. They've got an all-in-one e-commerce platform. They've got an in-person POS system. So wherever or whatever you're selling, Shopify has you covered. On top of that, Shopify works. It'll turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout. It's 36% better on average compared to other leading commerce platforms. And hey, sell a little more with less effort thanks to a little bit of Shopify magic. And that's nice, like having to worry about all of that back end stuff. I have been on both sides of this equation of like building your own storefront and shop, and also using Shopify and the turnkey nature of Shopify that lets you get in there and get going, but also lets you configure it as much as you need to, is super powerful. And they've got a dashboard full of analytics. So if you're setting it all up and you think you got it right and you're looking at the numbers and go, this doesn't, I don't know, maybe I need to add the F word a few more times in the description of this t-shirt. Well, it's all right there for you. And yeah, if you get lost along the way, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Did you know that Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the United States? It's the force behind Allbirds, Rothy's, Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Because businesses that grow with Shopify. And now here's your chance to get in on the ground floor. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/Jeff. That's all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Jeff right now to grow your business no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/Jeff. I'd like to thank Shopify for sponsoring the episode. Okay, The Last Descendant has been out for, I guess, a little over a week, a couple of weeks. Sometimes it seems like a game that's been out forever. I feel like I'm encountering really high-level players in there, and some of their patch notes are written in such a way where they're like, we added this to the game. I'm like, what? No, the game just came out. What do you mean? You didn't just add it this week? Like, have you been, like, it's something confusing about the time involved here. I know they've run a couple of betas and stuff. They did the thing that all live service games do now, where they ran betas that were like, hey, if you play during our beta period and level a character up to whatever, we'll give you this. And if you do this, we'll do this. If you take the survey, we'll do this. And there was like 3 or 4 different things that you would get by jumping through hoops during the various beta periods. They did the thing that all these games do, where they're like, hey, sorry, the game launched weird, and some people haven't been getting the things that they should be getting from the beta period, so we've decided to give everyone everything from the beta. You're like, okay. Yeah, it's like, okay, so yeah, because I did not play it at all during the beta period, but I sure did get like a bear to strap to my back or whatever as a cosmetic or something. I was going to stream The Last Descendant last week, but the servers went down right before the stream started, and I ended up not touching it for days. It was sitting there installed, and I was just looking at it in the Steam lists and just going like, man, I don't want to fucking play this thing. The only thing I knew about it at that point was like, you know, a lot of people have been making comparisons to games like Warframe or Destiny 2. Like, you know, games that make it seem like it's very much up my alley. But I just every time I looked at it in the list, I was just like, do I want to start another one of these? Like, is this going to be? It's almost like this double-edged sword of, if it's bad, then that's kind of a waste of time. But if it's good, that's almost worse, because it's this free-to-play game that's going to, you know, monetize in a dozen different weird ways. And it was just this feeling of just like, it was just this real like malaise or something came over me. Like I had a moment about it where I was just like, what the fuck am I doing, man? I don't want to fucking play this game. And I don't want to have to fucking jump through these mind hoops to figure out what game I'm going to play next. You know? It used to be really hard to figure out what game you wanted to play next, but also the stakes were pretty set, right? It was, well, you know, I want to buy my next game. I hope I buy a good one. If I buy a bad one, that's no good, because it'll be a while before I can afford to buy another one. And that's that, right? You know, you're spending your $50, your $40 to $80, depending on how big the cartridge was, I suppose. And the stakes were relatively set, right? Now it's amorphous. It's cloudier. It's way more obfuscated, where you're just like, I don't know what this game is going to ask of me. I'm not really sure like where the I know it's free to play, and so I know that there's going to be, you know, monetization all over it. I just don't know how obtrusive it's going to be or not, and what exactly, what type of stuff they're going to be selling and whatever. This game's by Nexon, you know, the Korean publisher known for what like the Dungeon Fighter is that them? What Maple Story. I think that's the Maple Story people. And it just led me up to this moment of just like, I'm sitting here, the kids are asleep, I'm like, all right, time to game. And I'm looking at it and I'm just going like, dude, no, like I'm not going to do this. I'm going to play something else. I'm going to play rolling. I'm going to mess around with anything other than this. And I dodged it for like 3 or 4 nights. Weirdly enough, in the middle of all of that, I downloaded Zenless Zone Zero and played that for a couple of hours, even though that game has all of those exact same problems. I was like, well, what's up with this? Let's strap ourselves back into the Hoyoverse. And that game's very stylish. And then you get through like the first little bits of it and you're like, this doesn't feel great as like a character action game. And then it like dumps you out and you see it for what it is. And you see all the daily logins and you see the 9 different events of like, this is our login event. This is our daily login event. This is our launch login event. We're having an event. There's like 3 events going on. If you do this, you might earn this. If you do this, you might earn this. And if you do this, you might earn this. And there's ladies. And I played that for one night and I was like, dude, fuck this. I don't want to fucking do this. And so I feel like I got my fill of Zenless Zone Zero. And it's a shame, man. Zenless Zone Zero is gorgeous. It is a very stylish game. It is this like very post-Persona style of presentation to it, where a lot of just the menus and the looks of the characters and everything, I think it looks outstanding. And that's the new fucking free-to-play grift, right? I mean, that's the, and of course it was eventually always going to happen, right? That someone, and you know, we talked about this when Genshin Impact got really big. It's that feeling of, oh shit, they're not just making garbage ass phone games like this anymore. Now they're putting actual craft and effort into making these look as good as, if not better than, the expensive video games that I love to play. And you're like, shit. Man. And so I played a lot of Genshin Impact. I didn't I don't think I put any money into it. I'm pretty sure I never put any money into it. And it's awesome. Like whatever. Like that's, they should do that. The games, you know, obviously they're going to come and eventually look better, but it feels like that, you know, it's that reckoning. It's that like, uh-oh. Now the gacha games look way harder to deny than they did 10 years ago when it was just like, let's buy some JPEG files. Yeah, I don't know. Zenless Zone Zero, I just don't think it plays very well. I think ultimately that's my feeling on the early parts of that game, is I was drawn in by the look of it really hard. I was like, I love the style here. I think the characters seem like fun and interesting. But it just didn't play very well. In terms of just parry windows and just like, it just felt mushy. It's like that was the part where it just could not shake some kind of weird mobile game feeling at the end of the day, where it's just like, this doesn't play like a real video game. This plays like they really want no one to have any friction whatsoever in the early parts of this game, because they want to like fucking turn up the water on you until you go, oh man, I lost. I guess maybe I should buy some cubes. Is there like can I buy some cubes? Are there some cubes I can purchase for real money over here? And then I can feed the cubes to my ladies? What do I do? Are the ladies eating cubes in this one? Is this the one where we feed the ladies cubes and then they look like a maid, or is that the other one? I don't know anymore. Yeah, I don't know. It's the certain people will be way into Zenless Zone Zero, and more power to them. But it just, when it kind of dumped on me, when I played enough of it to get over the initial hump, and it was like, okay, by the way, here's what this game really is. Here's a daily login calendar, and I'm just like, God, no. And so I stopped. And then, a couple days later, I finally said, all right, it's time to see what the first Descendant, not the last Descendant. It's time to see what this thing is. This game, this game is almost good enough to get me to spend money, but the things that they're offering for sale, I think, are bad. And also the game is not. So the first Descendant is a lot like it feels a lot like Nexon sat down and said, all right, what else is out there? And they looked at Warframe. They spent a good long time looking at Warframe, and they were like, these are really cool and weird systems that you could monetize on top of monetization on top of monetization. But also, none of these characters are sexy enough. They're all weird robot suits. What the fuck is going on here? And so they instead made vaguely anime-styled characters that if you want to pay some money, you can dress most of them up like maids. Or school like academy outfits. And then they sat down and they said, okay, well, we want like a good, like we want something that plays like a modern video game. We want a third-person shooter. We want to do that. And so they spent some time looking at shooters. And so you see elements of Destiny in various portions of this. Also, I would liken it in part to a game like Outriders. And they took a lot of these elements and kind of threw them together and said, here you go. And so what it is, it's a third-person shooter where you are a character with 4 abilities. You unlock the 4 abilities pretty quickly. And you basically have a skill meter that determines how often you can fire them off. So for the character I started with, she shoots ice. And so her default thing, yes, and 42 in the chat says it's Outriders, but the gameplay is better, frankly. Yeah, so yeah. Yes, it plays, I think, a little bit better than Outriders did. Anyway, so you're a character, you can equip 3 guns and also these 4 abilities. And so my ice lady, she can shoot ice, which does damage and will kind of slow them down. You have a speed ability, which is like kind of almost meant to be like, I guess it's meant to be like a Silver Surfer type of idea where you're kind of laying down ice. And so any enemy that walks on the ice will then be slowed by it, but you're kind of walking a little faster on it. There's another one where you're kind of doing a up close ice blast. And I keep making Sub-Zero hands, but she does not actually make Sub-Zero hands because they don't fucking know what they're doing over there. They could have fucking made... All right. And then there's a blizzard ability where you actually activate it and then have to kind of shoot it like throw it like a grenade almost, and it will land and pop, and anyone caught in it will take a bunch of damage and sometimes swirl around a little bit if they're smaller enemies. It also reminds me a little bit of Defiance. Remember Defiance and then the re-release of Defiance where they... I think it was not originally free to play. They were selling because it was on disc for 360. And then they eventually made it a free-to-play game. They completely re-released it, even though it was the exact same game. Really nasty, really weird stuff. It was based on a sci-fi network television show. And anyway, Defiance 2050 was the free-to-play re-release. And I played a whole lot of that game. It was not great, but you could do it, and I certainly did. It reminds me of that in a lot of ways as well. And you're kind of dropped into these open zones. They're not super large. There are 8 of them, I guess, in the game right now. But you go into these zones, you will talk to someone there, like 3 or 4 missions will pop up on your HUD out there in the world. You run up to an icon like you were starting a Destiny patrol, and you walk up to a pillar or a floating thing, and you say, I would like to do the mission. And then either... if there's no one else doing the mission, it will just say, okay, you're starting it. If there's someone else doing the mission, you will fucking poof teleport and reappear where they are doing the mission. And so the number of missions I've completed by running up to the thing and hitting the button, and then by the time I teleport, and rematerialize on the other end, they are finishing the mission, and I'm just getting credit for it and going like, sick. This is great. That has happened more than 5 times in my 3-ish hours with the game. And those missions are really, it's a bunch of really straightforward stuff. It'll be like it's shooter objective type shit. It'll be like, hey, defend this thing from enemies, and you need to stand near it because we're hacking it. Like, it's the equivalent of like Destiny walking up to a terminal and then hitting a button and your ghost pops out and starts hacking it, and then you turn around and shoot a bunch of waves of enemies, you know, like that sort of thing. Or like, hey, these enemies drop bombs when you kill them. You need to pick up those bombs and take them to this to a planting point at marked A or B and do both of them, and then you'll finish the mission. Or hey, just go over here and shoot everybody until we tell you you're good. That's kind of it, actually. Like the mission types thus far have kind of been that. The game also, it kind of reminds me of Phantasy Star Online in some ways. It is really a gun focused game. I have not seen any real. You do have a melee attack, but it's not. I don't know. I've seen something that alludes to there maybe being a sword, but that just might be a fancy name for another gun. I don't know. But you can change characters at will, but you only start with one. You unlock a second one relatively quickly, and she is electric in nature. And her abilities, I found, were not that different from the Ice Ladies, except the range on them was way worse. So it was like, if you want to shoot ice at people, you can do it from a pretty decent distance. If you want to hit them with electricity, you got to get up kind of close. But she had one that was like, that made her electric, and so anyone you got close to would, there was like, she was pulsing electricity, and it would do like a pretty good amount of damage to normal enemies that were standing near you, and it would pulse for 10 seconds or whatever it was. That was a fun ability to use. You just run around and watch them all blow up. And so, she seems like she's meant to be like faster, but also maybe, closer range. And, there's something to that. So there's like 15 characters in the game right now, I think. And they're different prices, which makes me wonder, do I have bad characters? Because you go and you look and you see, well, these characters, this tier of characters are 600 fancy coins instead of 300 or whatever. And you're like, are they better? And you like look, and there's no real indication, because all you really see is like, this guy is the quartermaster, and here's what and you can see what the abilities are, but that's about it. You don't really get an indication of like, hey, what the fuck is going on? Is this guy going to be more survivable, or is this guy going to, And so it's this weird implication that they make, where, because of the implication, you're left going, oh, should I spend money on this? Should I buy this character because it's better than the other ones? Then they have like 4 or 5 characters in the game that are ultimate versions of existing characters. And so my Ice Lady, whatever the hell her name is, there's Ultimate Ice Lady. And there are 2 packages for sale that include Ultimate Ice Lady. One is like 3,000 coins and one is 5,000 premium coins. And Ultimate sounds like it's better, but if you look at the abilities, they're all the same abilities. Also, if you want to buy the package for the Ultimate version of the character, it is $100. 5,000 coins is $100 of real money. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. And there's zero indication in the shop of like, will this really mighty my Ice Lady man? Is she going to do more damage? Is she better than the base version of the Ice Lady for $100 I would hope so. I'm sorry, there's a 3,000 coin version if you don't want as many cosmetics, and 3,000 coins is probably $50 or something. I don't know what I don't know what the exact translation of 3,000 coins to real dollars in that is, but I do know that it's the thing where they give you bonus coins when you buy more. And so you're buying 5,000 coins, but you get an extra 750 for a nice $99.99. But there's nothing there that says anything about what I'm buying other than cosmetics. And so what the fuck am I getting for that money? Is it a fancy skin? Because they also sell fancy skins. You can buy makeup for your pretty ladies as well. I have not seen any makeup for the men. There are men in the game. It is not a game entirely full of anime ladies you can dress up like schoolgirls or maids. But it is mostly that. And I'm at a loss, man. I'm just and you just look at that and you think about this game and how and I don't mean to single this game out for this particular stuff, because this is kind of endemic, I think, to the genre and to, you know, free to play, you know, games in general this way. But like, they're always going to have something else to sell. But more importantly, they're never going to, like, the story in so many of these games, I feel, has been, and you know, and correct me if I'm wrong. I would love to see something in the chat. If anyone has like an example of like a free to play game like this, where they were like, hey, actually the story here was really good. Because so much of the story in this game and so many of these games feels so thrown together, and also like it is just spinning its wheels because they know that they want you to play this game forever. There were things there were story things in Genshin Impact that I remember going like, oh, this is kind of interesting. And someone in chat is saying, yeah, that some people were saying, you know, that's specifically about Genshin. Someone's Generac says that Honkai's story is pretty good. Well, Honkai star rail for that ass. It's just fun to say. Matto says Warframe. So Warframe is an interesting one, right? Is Warframe an actually good story, or is it just a fucking really weird thing where they pulled a big shocking twist out years later and you're like, oh fuck? Because I know that like the big shocking thing that they did in Warframe is fucking hilarious and like kind of awesome, and I hope to see it someday when I return to Warframe every 18 months to play 3 hours of it and go, what the fuck am I doing? Honkai Star Rail gives Phantasy Star story thread vibes sometimes. Yeah, I feel like like PSO2, the story has been absolutely nothing. You know, it has just been like, hey, we got to stop these bad guys. They're still coming. And this game has a lot of that as well. And so the other thing they do, the other kind of combat that I've done so far that I think is neat in the First Descendant, is you go and fight these colossuses. And this is, you matchmake for this separately and go into it, and it's like a boss fight, sort of. PSO2 would have these moments where you could only kind of do them on timers, where you would jump into this big event and fight a big boss. You're like, oh, we're gonna go fight Dark Falls. Okay, isn't that the final boss in this whole thing? Yes, but you can do it every 45 minutes. Okay, awesome, great. Online games and story, it's so fun. So what you do here is you will pick which boss you want to fight. You will matchmake into a fight, and the first one that you do against this kind of walking tank thing is you're just kind of dropped into this arena, and you fight this thing. You kill it because it's not super tough. and then you pick up the loot and leave. It's like a PSO1 boss fight in that way, where it's just like, here's this kind of tight arena where you're fighting a gigantic thing, and then at the end of it, you're gonna get a bunch of loot will pop out of it, and you'll go do something else. And in those particular fights, they put weak points on the bosses that you can shoot until they glow, and it's a weird getting it right to where, like, okay, it's in a vulnerable state for like just a couple of seconds, and if I time this right, you have a grappling hook in the game. All the characters have one, and you can just pop it off and grab onto things, and you can swing around. Like, it actually feels pretty good once you get the hang of it, because you can kind of swing around corners and do some neat shit. But in these boss fights, you are shooting a weak point until it is glowing, and then you are grappling it, and you will grapple up to it, like in a weird. And they even call them it is a Colossus, and so there is almost sort of a, hey, here's a little bit of Shadow of the Colossus on top of all the other games that you're going to look at. When you look at the First Descendant, it's very easy to talk about this game solely in names of other games. It's a wide spread of them. It's not just one thing. I like, people keep saying Warframe, and yes, the itemization and a lot of that stuff is some real fucking Warframe type shit. Well, I'll talk about that in a bit, I guess. But like here, you get your kind of Colossus, and so you will grapple up to them, and then while you're up there, you can pull the trigger and fucking slam on that item until you break it off. And it'll try to fling you off, and you can pull the left trigger to kind of hang on a little bit, and there's a bit of a struggle there. But the timing windows on that are so tight that you're almost better just like, fuck it, I'll stay on the ground and keep shooting. And maybe the later boss fights are better that way. I have been the only person that I've ever seen grapple up to a boss in the 3 or 4 times I've done that fight, because that fight, once you're over leveled for it, takes like fucking 15 seconds to do. Maybe not that long, but maybe longer, rather, maybe not quite that short. But it is very fast to just focus that thing down and blow it the fuck up. And the first time you do it, like you are getting unique items, because every time you want to craft, you have to craft things in the game. Much like Warframe, you will do research to construct. Basically, if you want to grind out characters and guns and stuff like that, you will have to find, in my experience, looking at the list, I think it is every single thing of value that you want to craft, you will need to find 4 things first. And they will tell you what those things drop from, and sometimes they only drop in hard difficulty, and so like, I'm dozens of hours away potentially from being able to go get this to drop for real. And so in order to, like, they have you go through it when you craft your second character. You kind of do it automatically, of like, you find the 3 items along the way, and then the 4th item it comes off of that boss when you fight it. And then after that, you're like, oh, okay, I can go craft this rabbit lady now. That's fun. But to do that again, now that they've walked you through it in the plot, now that the main quest has dragged you through crafting a character, the rest of them seem a little more difficult to come by. And so maybe you should just buy a character instead, right? And guns are the same way. Some guns. So guns are dropping all the time, and guns, and you have shields you're equipping. There's like 4 different slots that you can equip items to, and some of them will raise your maximum shield. You've got a shield and health in a Halo-like situation, but the health does not automatically recharge. You have to collect health off of enemies when they die. And there are sets with set bonuses there, and as you equip things, it will raise and lower your skill power so that your elemental attacks or whatever attacks you have will do more damage. And then also you equip 3 guns. You have 3 slots for guns. And it's got an assortment of assault rifles and SMGs and 3-round bursts rifles and sniper rifles and shotguns and launchers and beam rifles and so on and so forth. And they are dropping constantly. I'm dismantling almost all of them. But also I'm finding a lot, like I'm basically, it's like, it's the same gun, but higher level is what was happening, here in the like levels 5 to 15 or 16 range that I'm in right now, where you're like, oh, okay, here's the same gun I have, but it's better. So let's equip it. Because it's just going to make the numbers higher, and we love that. There are ways for you to infuse guns into other guns if you have a gun that you like, but you want to level it up. But like so far, guns have just been dropping all over the place, so I haven't really had to do that. But there are guns that seemingly don't drop that you will then have to craft. The first boss. So what the fuck is the story in this game? You touch a floating ball that looks like a ghost from Destiny, and as soon as you touch it, you come into contact with a character called the Guide, and she's a pretty lady that only you can see. And by you, I mean everyone playing the game and most of the characters you talk to. There are perhaps, in fact, only 2 characters in the game that cannot see the Guide, and they're very suspect of the Guide. There are some bad guys known as the Vulgus, that's the name of Capcom's first arcade game, I believe. Vulgus. And so you are looking to find, like, the lady, you get access to the lady in your subconscious, but the ball is stolen by the bad guys. And so you got to find the ball, and there are 3 balls. And I think if you had all 3 of the balls, you would be able to close a dimensional portal like Pacific Rim, which is keeping those giant monsters there. When you go to fight the giant monsters, there's a line of dialogue there about like, these fucking things are going to keep coming until we get the balls. I think that's the story in the First Descendant. First Descendant. Your character, also the weapons that you equip, you also get modules that you can equip onto them. And this is the most Warframe thing in this entire game. You know how you get the little cards or whatever the fuck they're called in Warframe, and you can combine them, or you can lay them out, and some weapons will have more room for cards than others, and you can level up the gun to add more slots for cards. It super has that. Like, you're getting these modules and you are equipping them onto guns. The modules are kind of gun specific, and luckily they stay with the gun type. So if you find a higher level version of that gun and equip it, the modules will stay. You don't have to sit there and fuck with it every single time. And it even has a button that just says, do it for me, like Warframe does. That's just like, I can't look at this any longer. You need to equip whatever the fuck I can equip, and just let me hit the button and go, and you can do that. And that is, and then there's a whole system for leveling up the modules and combining modules and selling the modules, dismantling the modules, and and so as you dismantle guns, you're getting all types of currencies, which you then would use to research maybe one of the 4 core items you might need to buy to get one of the guns. And so everything is just this constant. Every single thing you look at in this game, you're like, oh, okay, here's another sink that they have created for me to grind. Or perhaps spend a little money and bypass some of that grind. So, obviously they're selling cosmetics, but also they're selling double XP booster and double gold boosters, and you can just straight up buy the guns and some of the other things as well. The first boss's name is Greg. By the way, the enemy race, the Vulgus, is full of all these fucking weird robots and all this crazy looking shit that don't look especially human at all. And it's some kind of alien race. And then the first named guy you fight once the game starts is Greg. And the subtitles, when it's turned on, all his lines are just attributed to Greg. When you see him, when you kill Greg, there's yes, and Greg has his own gun. Greg's whatever blaster that you can craft if you want to spend 1,000 hours or whatever the fuck it would take. When you go to fight and kill Greg, above his, I believe it says Greg the Star-Crossed. So it's not just Greg. It plays fine. Again, like, you know, like that kind of, I feel about it from, like, if we remove the money end of this for just a split second, this game would fill a really similar hole as like Outriders did, of just like, oh, I could go for like a regular old third-person shooter and just like, you know, hey, some stuff's going to drop and I'm going to equip it and whatever, man. Let's get out there and just have some fun. And, you know, maybe a group of friends could get together and blast their way through it and whatever else. Like, the aspects of it are fine. I think the way they handle research and stuff is like, and maybe it's just because I'm playing it from the beginning and I'm not coming into it after they've added it or whatever. But I do think there are aspects of this that are more straight, like systems-wise, that are more straightforward than their Warframe counterparts. Because, you know, you're leveling up your individual characters. There's also an overall mastery level that as you gain mastery, you can equip more cards and stuff. And your inventory, I think, goes up as well as you gain ranks in mastery. There are gun affinities, so the guns themselves level up, just like Warframe. Yeah, it's there's a lot of Warframe in there, but for me, I think a lot of the Warframe stuff is in the systems and the numbers and the meters and the gauges and the points where you can level up. And some of the monetization, because, you know, when you look at the Warframe store, it's a similar type thing of, right, you know, you can go grind out all the parts you would need to craft most of the guns and frames and whatever else, or you can give them money to do it. Like Warframe is at least somewhat similar in that regard. If you prefer one over the other, I think that's fine. But I at the end of the day, I don't think they're that different when it comes to that specific part. This game, you're a lot less. The grappling hook is cool and gives you some mobility, but it is way less you flipping out and fucking cutting people than Warframe is. And also it seems like it's significantly less game, but obviously Warframe has had a decade plus head start to just make shit for their game. So yeah. And so, yeah, it feels like this amalgamation of, you know, a lot of the ways that Warframe is built under the hood, behind the scenes, the numbers going up. It feels like a lot of that stuff comes from Warframe. The shooting and all of that other stuff feels, like I said, somewhere around an Outriders. Some of the world structure and boss fight type stuff feels like a little bit of Phantasy Star Online. And yeah, you know, again, there's a kind of a longer list of games you could get into. It's Unreal Engine 5, and so it's like technically very pretty. I did, for whatever reason, man, I was going down the rabbit hole on it a little bit last night. And so I've been playing it on PC mostly. And it looks fine. It runs smooth, looks good, you know. It also is on consoles, and so I downloaded the PS5 version and the Xbox Series X version, and they look like noticeably worse. Like in town, when you go back to the social hub, they do this thing where they don't lower the frame rate of the world, and so as you're turning the camera and all that other stuff, it works smooth. Yes, it is on last generation platforms as well, which I can't even begin to imagine what that must look like on a PS4 or an Xbox One for that matter. Jesus. But they do this thing where it's like they're having the frame rate of your character, like the smoothness of the animation of you moving around goes to total shit in town. And it's weird. And so I went through a little bit and got out there and did some shooting on the Xbox and PS5 versions. I was like, this looks fucked up. Not the worst thing in the world, but it's, it is not nearly as smooth. It has some options for if you want fidelity or balanced or performance. I left it on balanced. And then also it has like toggles for frame generation and ray tracing. And it was weird. I don't know if there was something with the settings that maybe I messed this up, but in my experience, I could not turn ray tracing on the PlayStation 5, but also I could not turn frame generation on the Xbox Series X. So I don't know. It was a weird. There's a world in which I really like this game and play it for 100 hours or more. It's the abilities are like fun to use. It's breezy, like there's some missions and stuff that are supposed to be a little bit longer and a little bit more involved that I haven't unlocked yet or haven't figured out how to get into. It's like icons on the map that are like, here's this weird glowing ball, like, and it has rewards, and so you're like, and says like, it one of the nice things it does is it kind of tells you how long a mission is before you accept it. They're like, this one will take you like 3 minutes, but then there's ones that are like, this one will take you like 20. And I'm like, all right, let's go try one of these. And you walk over to a spot on the map where there's just a big weird orb, and you can't do anything to it. And I'm like, well, all right. Do I need an item here? What do I don't know. But yeah, it is not a terrible video game, but I think that the way that and I have not tried it on Steam Deck yet. I am curious to see how it runs there. Some people in chat are saying that they've heard it works fine. But man, I'm sick of having to sit there and judge and weigh out games this way. I'm just fucking sick of it, dude. I'm just so fucking tired of like these types of calculations of like, okay, well, when I play free to play games, if I decide I like a game enough, I tend to invest early, of just like, cause I'm not going to like spend 24 hours, get to a point where I'm almost done with it and then go, I think I'm going to put $100 into this thing. Usually it's like, this thing seems cool. I'm going to put a little money into it and never do that again. And this doesn't feel like it's that. I don't feel compelled to spend money on it. It's like it's almost there. It's almost at a point where it's almost really cool, but then you sit there and you look at how many different drops it wants you to collect and then filter those drops and then spend your in-game grind currency to turn those drops into one of the 4 pieces of the gun that you're going to research. And so every step of the way, it wants you to invest time and currency. Like, oh, come back in 4 hours and your research thing will be done. Or what if you sped it up? And I don't want to do that. I just don't want to fucking deal with that shit, man. I don't want to, like, this is a game that if this was something that was just like, hey, pay one price, whatever, it wouldn't be like an amazing video game. You wouldn't be sitting here going like, this is an 8 out of 10. You know, you'd be like, this is fine. Yeah, it's like if this game was $60 or something like that, and you're 70, and you went out and bought it, you'd be like, this is okay. It's like a perfectly fine video game. It's a totally fine third-person shooter. These abilities are all right. That's cool. It's like it's like a 3 out of 5. It's a 4 out of 5, maybe. It's somewhere in there. It's a Metacritic 72. How about? And I just don't want to have to sit there, because every minute I'm playing it, I'm sitting there wondering, is this going to go anywhere? Because if I want to just play games and just like have fun in the moment, there's decades of video games at my disposal that are fun in the moment, right? And plenty of them are better than this. And so when I think about this and think about what it would take to get me over the hump and playing the First Descendant, and I will tell you up front, I am almost certainly going to spend a little bit more time with this, and we'll see where it goes. I will report back if it somehow sucks me in and I'm like, whoops, this $100 skin looks sick. Which it doesn't. It doesn't actually look good. I just don't want to have to sit here and do the mental calculus of like, because they've introduced so many different ways to spend money, I now can't help but think of every moment that I am playing the game in a couple of different ways. One, would this be more fun if I paid money into it? And two, doesn't that just mean I should just go play something else? Is this ever going to go anywhere? Is there going to be a big story crescendo? And am I going to come away from it feeling satisfied ever? Or is there always going to be another carrot because they've always got to have another year, because they've always got to have another season, because they've always got to... By the way, there's a battle pass also. Also, there's a battle pass on top of everything we've discussed. If you would like to buy the upgraded battle pass that comes with the first 25 tiers unlocked already, they will allow you to do so. It's very kind of them. John Apocalypse in the chat said, I have played 11 hours of this game and spent about 12 pounds on a maid skin. All right, well. Sure. I mean, and I think that's totally fine. I think that's totally fine. If you are enjoying the game enough, and I do that. That is when I talk about like investing in a game up front, it is that feeling of like, I played this for 5 hours, 6 hours, whatever. I like this. I want to see where it goes. I'm going to put a chunk of money into it, and then I'm going to buy stuff. When Halo Infinite came out, I was like, this is awesome. I'm having a great time. Once it started working, once it kind of, which is debatable about when that exactly was. I put $100 into it. I did best value. I bought the best value and bought some cosmetics, and I was like, well, I want this sick fucking armor, and you know, Master Chief armor is cool as fuck, and look at this, and this guy looks like a boombox or whatever the fuck. And then never again, right? And I feel fine about that. I had a really good time with that game. I invested $0 in it up front. I was like, cool, yeah. And so, you know, I have done that and felt like I've gotten my money's worth, or felt like I was like, it's almost like a tip or something. Sometimes how I view it in games where it is purely cosmetic, because I don't often place a ton of value on cosmetics. For me, it is a feeling of just like, I'm spending a lot of hours with this game. I should put some money into it because I like it. And I feel like this is a fair system, and I'm getting something out of it that I actually do want. And that's that. This feels like the more you spend, the more opportunities you have to spend. And that's how a lot of mobile games end up. Like the biggest, I mean, and I have done this, but imagine doing this. Imagine spending money in an idle game where like, oh, the numbers need to keep going up. What if I could make the numbers go up faster? The thing they don't tell you, there are infinite numbers. There will always be more numbers. And if you spend money to skip some of the numbers, there's on the other end of that, there's just more fucking numbers and more opportunities for you to say, what if I skipped some more numbers? And that's how I feel about a game like this, where they will sell you in-game items, where they will sell you boosters, but also like they will sell you items and then go like, well, you could just grind them as like almost this defense mechanism. I've not seen them discuss the monetization of the game, so I don't know if they are defensive about it or whatever. It's a pretty established formula, so I don't know why they would be defensive about it. But it is this feeling of just like, dude, there's not enough content. I can already tell right now there's not enough content in this game between the 8 territories that they have and the 8-ish colossi that you can fight. I don't want to grind these missions and these events over and over again to get enough drops to then do research, to then funnel that down to one of the 4 pieces of the next character I want to unlock or the next gun, and then go and find the next one and grind that you're like, oh, I got to dismantle all these shields to get these items to do this. And I'm, assuming that's the path. They'll tell you. One of the nice things about the game is that when you go and you're like, hey, I want to find this item, where do I find it? It will say, hey, this is something you research, and to research it, you will need this. And so it's like, okay, I need these 4 drops and 500,000 gold in my grind currency, my non-premium currency, to research one of these 4 pieces. And so I have to do that 4 different times for 4 different items, and then I can pay another chunk of my grind currency and however many hours or whatever to turn those items into the character or the gun or whatever. And it's all of that just feels like a cop-out. I like all of that feels like, hey, if you've got the fucking time to do that, I guess go ahead. That feels like it feels like one of those situations where a company is doing a giveaway, and because of the way the law works, they have to say like, no purchase necessary. You can always just mail in a thing to us and we'll enter you into the giveaway in the smallest print possible. Like, yeah, you could do this. And some of this, I can't even really single out the first Descendant for this, because all of these games are like that, right? There are many games like this. This is not the first one of those. It will certainly not be the last. But it's frustrating to have a game where you go like, this game's almost really good. And so that's kind of the downfall. That's why I say that there is that double-edged sword where, like, as I was really apprehensive about launching the game in the first place, because I knew like, that sure does say Nexon right there. I sure do know what I'm probably getting myself into here, huh? And I don't know that I'm up for that. And then I launched it and I was like, oh, actually, like there is some craft here to this. There's some neat stuff here. Gameplay wise, it's like, hey, you could do a lot worse than this. Like, you run around shooting shit and, hey, we're popping off headshots and we're doing this and I'm equipping, the numbers are going up and I got my skills and I'm launching ice and like, oh yeah, all right, okay, all right. I've played plenty of games worse than this, but it's almost worse that it's a decent game. It's almost worse, because then you're like, oh, well, shit, man. I wish that I could have like more fun with this. And they're like, you can. Here are the most popular items in the store. I'm like, but yeah, no, it's games are very frustrating as a business right now. I think that, a lot of that ends up tying into a lot of the stuff we've been talking about for the past handful of months here, just with kind of where things are at. But I don't, I don't know what the solution is. Yeah. And there will be people in different situations, right? There will be people, and it's nice in a weird way when games come out, when high quality games come out and they're free to play, because it means that there are a lot of people who would not be able to afford games otherwise are able to at least play them, and maybe they never put money into them and whatever else. And so from that angle, it's cool. Like I said, I don't think that this game is like blowing me away. Like, like I said, it's the sort of thing that you would go like, this is probably a low 70s on your Metacritic type of thing. I think you'll have some people that are extremely put off by it, and you will have some people that get into it in kind of a weird way where you're like, huh, all right, really? Sure. And it'll all average out somewhere between 70 and 75. The free to playness of it, I think, changes it. But I'm saying if it was just a game where they were selling it outright, you wouldn't come away from this going like, this is a game of the year contender. You're like, yeah, sure, it's all right. They did a bunch of Twitch drops for this, which is so these games launch and they have to market the hell out of them because they've got to get a bunch of people through the door, because that like user acquisition is the game here. Like, you've just got to get as many people through the door as possible because that some percentage of them will spend money, and you need to keep those people coming through the front door for the rest of all time. And it only gets harder and more expensive to acquire those users the longer you go. And so there's like a PlayStation Plus pack that's like, here's some paint thing, which I couldn't find anywhere. And there are Twitch drops, which like you can hang a piece of pizza from your chest. Literally. That is one of the items you get from the Twitch drops. But the other thing they did is, I was looking last night, and there were a bunch of sponsored streams running for the first, again, I'll try to keep saying the name in case anyone joined late. The First Descendant. It is first, it's not last. And so there were a bunch of people running these sponsored streams. And I was watching someone for a little while last night because I wanted to have the pizza on my chest. And so I needed to leave this stream running for at least a half an hour in order to get the pizza. And someone I was watching someone who was streaming it to, 100 people or something like that. And they were saying, man, I don't even know if I'm going to get paid for this, because when you took on the bounty or whatever it was, you needed to have an average number of players, and you needed to play the game for 2 hours in order to make the money. And he was saying that like so many people left after he switched games to this sponsored thing that he was like, I don't know if I'm actually going to even make the money off of this. And it was such a fucking bummer. I was just like, what the that's terrible. It's a fucking terrible situation. And that's launching games nowadays. Or that's launching free-to-play games, right? Is you just like, we've got to get as many people through the door as quickly as possible. We got to do a full court press on everything we've got. We've got to get streamers playing the game. We've got to get, someone in chat that can't be. Well, I guess it could be. It scrolled off, but okay, yeah. Dynamob says you can't say gotcha during sponsored streams of Zenless Zone Zero. I cannot use the word gotcha. That's the world in which we live. Hey, speaking of Zenless Zone Zero, I'm going to bring this up. This is real silly. I got an email. They're doing a thing. They're doing some event in the Los Angeles area coming up here. Where it's not like a, they're not maybe they're showing the game, but it is something they're doing. Oh, that's my email coming in. Hello, little birds. We're going to be giving out collectible augmented reality pins to VIP attendees, including ZZZ's mascot, Bang Boo. These are great sentences. Okay, here's it's a press release. Like they're inviting me to an event. It's whatever, right? It's not necessarily like the game is out, so it's not like some big come see the future of the game. It's not like a press event. It's like hey, we're putting on a big spectacle in celebration of the launch of the game or whatever. Your presence and so it is whatever. It's a very normal thing, and then it gets down to the bottom here. If it would be helpful, we can even ghostwrite an article or event coverage for you and provide original photography or video to support your piece. I should almost just say, yes, absolutely. I would, yes. And then just see what they send. But I'm now that I've said this publicly, I've fucked that all up. So whatever. I can't think of a situation that someone has said that to me before. Of just like, hey, we could write a thing up for you if you want. Like I definitely have had situations where there's been like, hey, how much would it cost? Like I used to get, the generic inbox would get constantly stuff like, how much do you charge for a sponsored post on your website that would have rich backlinks to our blah, 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 like how much would it cost to run spam on your fucking on your front page? And I would just look at it and go like, I can't believe that's what this business is now. And I would shrug and never think about it. But I don't think I ever got anyone saying like, hey, we're having an event. I'll write it. We'll write it. We'll write it for you if you want. Like, what? No. What? Anyway, I found that to be interesting. Now I mostly get the kind of constant cold call thing I get as I look over here so I have a separate inbox for the YouTube. I have a separate email address that it shows, I think it's here on the Twitch page live, and I think maybe it's down there somewhere. And it is the email address associated with the YouTube channel. And it gets some of the worst stuff. Most of it lately is stuff like, hey, we want to use AI to cut your videos into short pieces for social media. And they've stopped saying AI. There was a good 3 months there where they were like, hey, we're using cutting edge AI to do this, and it's awesome, and it's inexpensive and whatever, but now they don't. Now they just say like, we can create 10 shorts for each video you run, X number of shorts per month, and all this other stuff. And like, I would not be opposed to working with someone externally that produced that type of content for the right price, because in my experience, the return on that investment has been very low. But instead, they're like, what do you think it would feel like to have 10 times the number of YouTube viewers that you have now? And I'm like, it would feel like a fucking scam? I don't know. It would feel like engagement would go to shit because you're probably paying bots to do it. Like, what? Anyway, it's the world's grimy. The world is okay. Two things, and I can't fault people for feeling this way about it. Sometimes it feels like a generational thing, or it's just the natural progression of the weird reality in which we live. Where I feel like it's specifically the phrase or the concept of like, I'm getting that bag. Like, okay. Are you? Like, are you, how widely are you being taken advantage of in order to get said bag? And it's easy for me to sit here and say this because I was lucky enough to build my career at a time when that was very much not the fucking thing. Though also, I was unlucky enough to build my career at a time when that was very much not the thing. And so maybe if I had started 10 or 15 years later, I would have gotten that bag in a way that I have not. And, you know, whatever. That's not to say I'm doing fine. Hey, sign up for the Patreon. These kids got to eat. Patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann. Like, I am out here doing it the same as everyone else. I don't mean to shit on people, but at the same time, yeah, Yo Brack says, getting that bag should come at the expense of corporations, not the other way around. Yeah. If possible. That's not always possible. That's not always possible, you know? But I think that there are people out there that will do anything. Anything. And I just, that stuff just bums me out. And sometimes that's the stuff that seems generational and whatever else. Though that's also I don't know, whatever. I don't want to get into the fucking weird, insane Generation X discussion that is happening, still kind of happening online sometimes or whatever. I walked out of the room and I came back and my daughter was watching YouTube videos. And a video came on that was like story time, whatever, you know, and I sat there and I looked at it for a while and I was like, well, these are all AI generated images. Like right off the bat, you're just like, someone is making someone is generating fake princesses in some engine somewhere. And it was like a woman reading a story while there were static images being displayed. And it was about an ice princess, and she was, you know, she was fighting someone and doing whatever, you know, whatever it was. I don't know. And so early on, you look at it and you go like, okay, these pictures are not real. None of those photos are photos. They were realistic looking. Like if you just glanced over at the TV, you'd be like, that's a heavily photoshopped picture of a woman dressed up like a princess, and they photoshopped all the ice around her or whatever. And you're like, oh wait, no, I don't even think the lady is real. And then one step further, I started like Googling character names from the story. Because there's like bad guy and a good princess and whatever else. I'm like, what the fuck is this? And I started typing it all in and nothing came back at all. Like nothing. I'm like, oh, so was this story written originally for this YouTube channel? And I sat and I watched it for a little while longer and I listened to the voice reading the story for a little while longer and I was like, oh, yeah. 100% of this video was generated by fucking AI. And the story was fucking terrible. Like it's, you know, but like if you're 4, you're just like, I don't know, there's an ice princess. It's like Frozen, but not. And so it's like someone sat down and said, give me a story that's like Frozen, but not. And I was so fucking mad, man. I don't know. YouTube is trying to get better about labeling AI, and they're trying to, have a better takedown process for when, like, if your likeness or your voice or your something is used in an AI piece, like they're trying to make that easier for you to flag and manage. But that shit sucks, man. And it just kind of comes up because of the way all of these algorithms are. And you would love to think that YouTube would instead be like, no, we're just going to take all this shit down. Or, hey, we're going to give you a profile level flag that lets you say no fucking AI. But we're not there yet. I think the backlash will. Yeah, we'll see. I'll see. There were some reports and stuff. Like Goldman Sachs came out and said, "Hey, we think this shit is fucking fake as hell, and it's not going to do the things that they're saying it's going to do. And this whole thing looks like a fucking. It is about to become a real sinking ship." I'm proud to say. Well, I don't know, whatever. So I have, like. When I was working for a company, they have 401ks and all this other stuff, and you're able to like take a little bit of money and put it away, and now when I stopped working for a company, actually when I started at Red Ventures, I did not invest in their 401k because out of the gate I was like, I don't think I'm going to be here long enough to fill out the paperwork, and that turned out to not be quite true, but it was much easier to deal with. But anyway, I was able to, like I have a person who kind of handles that stuff. And it was interesting to kind of catch up with them recently and be like, so yeah, like none of your money is in any of this AI stuff because it's not going to, like, this is like a week and a half ago before the Goldman Sachs thing came out. And I was just like, yeah, this AI stuff is not going to last. It's going to be it seems like a real bubble. It's not something that we're going to invest your retirement money in. I was like, good. Yes. We're on the same page. I am working with the right people. And yeah, I don't know. It's whatever. But yeah, stuff's just fucking, this stuff is just, it's rotten, man. And it's hard because you can't, it's very hard to have that argument with a 4-year-old about like, hey, this isn't a real story. Like this thing you're watching is not real. There's another channel that comes up from time to time that I have not like, and so I have to use real YouTube because YouTube Kids, which they used to have a separate app, but now they instead built it into the same app on your TV or Roku. YouTube Kids is fucking terrible and will not show you the things that you want to try to find. YouTube Kids feels like a fucking scam. YouTube Kids feels like it is trying to force the official pay for this show thing to you at all times. YouTube Kids feels like it's like, oh, you're looking for some interesting things that are people playing with toys about a thing. Instead, here's the TV show upon which that is based. Maybe you could watch that. Like, no, if I wanted to watch that, I have a whole other apparatus over here that I would use for that. So no. And also it would not autoplay to the next video. So that would mean like every 5 minutes, you got to find another video and do all this other stuff. Yes, pre-screening shows and all that other. Yes, downloading stuff ahead of time, pre-screening it is the preferred method. But the kids at some point they would rather watch clips of Paw Patrol on YouTube than watch full episodes of Paw Patrol on Play. Yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting. Navigating these sorts of things with kids and picking your arguments about where you're going to lay down the law and be like, nope, turn this shit off. This is a fake video. You're not watching this AI fucking garbage in my house. That is where I draw the line. There was another person. Well, it was a person. It was like a girl. She has this channel. I don't know. But her whole thing was, here's the Disney princesses singing Taylor Swift songs. And so, you know, someone related to her or whatever had, you know, done the legwork to make that happen, which is, you know, not that difficult to do in this day and age, to make AI. Okay, we're going to take the AI Elsa voice and we're going to stem separate this Taylor Swift song. We're going to make Taylor Swift's voice into Elsa's voice, and then we're going to merge it back with I could do that in fucking 5 minutes. I have done that in 5 minutes with my own voice when I wanted to sound like that Pusha T song. Where is that? This is an ill-advised. I did this and I felt dumb for doing it, but is that here? I'm the reason the whole world love me. Now I got a question. Anyway, you could do that a lot better with a better voice sample and whatever else. The voice model of my voice is generations old at this point. It's scary. What service do I have all this stuff locally installed. It's all open source. Like you know, all the people charging money for this stuff, like don't pay these people. Well, if you have an NVIDIA card, I guess is the actual. If you have a recent NVIDIA card, don't pay these people. And so, like, it was just like, you know, and it's like one of those things that seems innocent enough. And here's this girl, and she's like ranking them and like, well, I thought it was cool when Elsa sang this Taylor Swift song, but I thought it was good. And I'm sitting there looking at it going like, this sucks. Like, it doesn't suck as much as some of the other stuff. But it's still just like, man, what are we doing? Anyway, that's the world in which we live. Whatever. You live in it too. You know that. It's just it's a very weird time right now. Right? The First Descendant, I will keep you posted. I am almost certainly going to play more of it. And as soon as I hit a wall in it, I'm going to completely uninstall it. I think that's how you have to treat these games. Is just like, as long as this game is serving me and I am not serving it, then that's okay. But the minute it feels like I'm like, and I don't think I'll ever do this again for a game. I could be wrong. You know, maybe there will be a game good enough somewhere down the line. In fact, there probably will be. So maybe I'm just full of shit out of the gate here. I don't want to do dailies ever again. I don't want to feel like I've got to fucking play a game every single day to meet some fucking login requirement, to get a stamp on a fucking fake calendar, to fucking kill 10 guys today because that's my daily and I get a little bonus for doing it. I just don't want to feel like these games are built that way. They shouldn't feel like fucking jobs, dude. And you can, there are a lot of ways to obfuscate that stuff, I think, and achieve the same fucking dark goals they're trying to achieve without being as naked about it. But perhaps they don't need to be naked about it because all of us are just sitting there going like, well, I gotta do my dailies. It fucking sucks, dude. We have been played for fools. And some of you have known this for years, and in some ways I have too, but you know, it was this feeling of just like, am I really going to play another one of these? Am I really going to fucking do this again? With the first Descendant. And yeah. Ben H in chat says this is why the new Forza Motorsport sucks. They gutted the single player and replaced it with weekly events. Yeah. Like there are ways to make your game feel alive and current that don't have to come at the expense of the video game part of your video game. This needs to be done better. I'm looking at a very little baby out my window. Sorry. Distracted. Very tiny baby. Oh, big smile on that baby. This can be done better. It needs to be done better. I think for the sake of this shit, It just and yeah, I just it's very hard for me to feel okay about like playing, like dedicating myself to a game that way for those reasons. I will happily, and I've been looking for a game to dedicate myself to in some weird ways, you know? Like I feel like I've been between games for a very long time. There hasn't just been a thing where I've been like, yeah. You know, for a while it was like some years it's Call of Duty. You know, like at times when Destiny has been fantastic, like, you know, like that's felt okay. But yeah, Monster Hunter World was another great example of that. Yeah, totally. But like getting that game that's like, hey, this is the thing I really want to play, and I'm playing a lot more games than this, but this is my home base. This is the game I want to keep up with. This is like I feel like I haven't had one of those. And yeah, I don't know. Like people are saying that Destiny has been really good, and I do want to finish that campaign at some point, but I keep kind of launching into it and doing some stuff and going like, all right, I chipped away at half of this mission. I guess I need to come back before the weekly reset and finish it, huh? And then I forget. That's that. I don't know if it saves those sorts of checkpoints on a week-to-week basis or not, but like it's just been, I feel a yearning, you know, for like a good kind of home base kind of video game, you know, and it just doesn't feel like it's there right now. I don't know. Roblox, yeah, I did install Roblox last week. I forgot to mention that. I was really curious because I kept seeing images of first-person shooters that looked like fully realized in a modern context and weren't just like Roblox dudes. And I looked at it and went like, wait, Roblox can do that? I should probably check it back in on Roblox. It's been a while. And I launched that and ran around in some fucking weird ass first person shooter and went like, man, all right, that's neat. And then completely forgot about it. But I don't know. Let's get into the news. PlayStation will be attending the Tokyo Game Show. Feels like most of these reports lately have been about places that Sony is not going, but Sony has announced plans to attend the show this September. This is according to videogameschronicle.com. And they are quick to point out it is unclear what Sony would even show here because TGS is taking place after Astrobot and Concord will be out by then. So presumably everything that PlayStation has for the rest of the year will be out already. And so we'll have to see if this ends up having new announcements or new games or new anything. Would they show hardware here? I suppose anything is possible. Or will this just be like, and as someone who used to attend TGS, I will say that there were times when you would go look at a company's booth at TGS and be like, oh, these are all games that are out. Or in some cases, these are games that are out in the US and these are games that are coming out in Japan very soon or whatever. So yeah, I mean, do we see a professional PlayStation 5 here? Anything's possible at this point. But yeah, in terms of like what sort of games would they have to show, and will they have brand new games to show, or or anything of that nature. Who can say? It would be really neat if they just pulled up and they were like, we're back at TGS, and here's the new Vib ribbon. Here's what Parappa 3 is coming out, and announced some games that felt like they represented the Japanese roots of the platform. That would be fun. I don't think they're going to do that. But yeah, Fat Scout in the chat says, I would assume that a PS5 Pro reveal would probably be at a more Western-focused event. Like, yes, but also the Western media or like the reports will travel the world, right? It doesn't matter where they announce it. It could just be, hey, we've got a time in the year where we're looking to make this announcement around this time. Are there any events we can attach to TGS? Man, that'll work, I guess. Yeah, that'll work, I guess. Like, I would think about it more that way. But that's not me saying I think that that's going to happen. That's just like, it could. It could. Anime Expo happened over the weekend. And it was weird seeing an LA anime convention and seeing like pictures of the LA Convention Center full of people. Because that's where E3 always was. And so I kept seeing all these pictures of the various convention halls and all the people that were waiting to get in and everything. And I kept looking at it and going like, I know exactly where that is. I know exactly which staircase that photo was taken from. I know, like, this is the precise... I could drive a car and walk to that exact spot and stand in that exact spot. Yeah, I don't know. I miss the LA Convention Center. It's a disgusting thing to say. It's a terrible place to be. The food is incredibly overpriced. And it was really only a show that was like cool to be at if you had a booth, because that gave you a central place to go. It was not a public space. Like, oh, I can go hide in our meeting room for like 5 minutes and maybe there'll be a Coke there I could drink. Oh, that'd be nice. And without that, it's even worse. But like seeing signs for Kensha Hall and going like, oh yeah, and that's, and at the Anime Expo, they put the Artist Alley stuff down in Kensha Hall, which is somehow fitting, I guess. Anyway, at Anime Expo, the Like a Dragon folks were in attendance, and they gave a very kind of quick quote here about the next game they're working on that Video Games Chronicle picked up on. It just says, according to several fans in attendance, the studio said, we can't tell you what kind of game it is, but I will tell you, you'll be surprised. And that fans later clarified that the team seemed to be referring to the next Like a Dragon game rather than another franchise. So, I mean, obviously they've done some interesting stuff in the past with this franchise, relatively recently. They've been mixing it up really well. And so the idea that they would mix it up again, I think, is awesome. But what do you think they're going to do? Here's my pitch. Virtua Fighter, Like a Dragon. That's the whole pitch. And it's just a new Virtua Fighter game with like 3 people from the fucking Yakuza games in it. That's it. What do you think? What do you think? Huh? They were partially, at least, responsible for that more recent Virtua Fighter re-release, the Virtua Fighter Esports, they called it in Japan or whatever, that came out on like PS4, which is still a really good version of that VF game if you're looking for one. Yeah, so I don't know. We'll see what they're working on. That just that struck me funny, of like them working on something that they specifically say what kind of game it is. You will be surprised by what kind of game it is. And so my sick hope will continue to be, I hope they are making a fighting game. Because, and I hope that fighting game is just a new Virtua Fighter game loosely attached to the Like a Dragon franchise. That's it. That's it. Manor Lords has been in the news. This is kind of another, this is maybe even, some of this is loosely attached to maybe some of the issues I have with the First Descendant. There was some game developer, it was on LinkedIn of all places. Saying, God, what is the fucking piece here? So, this started because some guy named Tim Bender, who runs a publisher called Hooded Horse, talking about a sustainable path. And that is let me get the names straight on this. Manor Lords has been popular, but also Hooded Horse is the publisher of Manor Lords. Sorry. And this is a response to someone who's the CEO of a company called Hinterland. This is coming from Eurogamer. I read this a few days ago, and then a lot of things have happened since then, so I apologize for being a little scattered on it. But basically, the original take was like, oh, Manor Lords, this is the pitfalls of early access. It seems like they're failing to maintain their Steam player base. Kind of looking at the same Steam charts that, Valve and ex-Valve people have said are not something to necessarily be relied upon as like completely accurate numbers to begin with. And so the publisher of the game kind of hit back at that and said, this is exactly the kind of distorted, endless growth, burden of expectations, line must go up perspective that causes so much trouble in the games industry. Manor Lords just sold 250,000 copies in the last month after selling over 2 million copies in its first 3 weeks. It has a very positive review rating of 88% with a median playtime of 8 hours and 48 minutes per player. Very long for any game, especially a recently released one. Players are happy, the developer is happy, and we as a publisher are thrilled beyond belief. And yet here we are. I'm just going to read his whole thing by fucking start to finish here. Manor Lords is apparently a case study in the pitfalls of early access because the, quote, game has been out for 2.5 months and there have been 3 fairly small patches. One of the patch notes being called small here runs over 3,000 words and over 10 single-spaced pages, leading to concurrent users have plummeted since launch. Yes, we didn't maintain the 173,000 concurrent player peak. And the apparently dark reality that some people, after enjoying the purchase of a premium single-player title, might decide to go on and play another game. The horror. And then, again, this is coming from Tim Bender, who is the head of the publisher for Manor Lords, kind of hitting back at someone saying that, they didn't fucking update enough, or they didn't fucking come back and they haven't had enough patches or whatever. But he goes on to say that he's been in contact with the developer. It is a game that is billed to a solo developer. On top of all this, I told him that after release, he was going to hear from all sorts of commenters talking about missed opportunities because he failed to grow as fast as they wanted and judging the game a failure by some kind of expectation that they formed. I told him to ignore all that, to focus on his core vision for the game, and to keep in mind that the early access road is long and he should not feel any sense of pressure from the expectations of others for both his own health and stress levels over the coming years and for preserving the state of calm and peaceful mind that supports his creative vision. If this industry is to find a more sustainable path forward, we need to move away from takes like this. Success should not create an ever-raising bar of new growth expectations. Not every game should be aimed at becoming some live service boom or bust, and a release should not begin an ever-accelerating treadmill on which devs are forced to run until their mental or physical health breaks down. And you see this news article fucking once a week. You see the news article of someone going, and last week it was fucking Helldivers. Oh, the concurrents are down. This game has lost 90% of its player base. Yeah, it's like fucking 3 months old. You know, like Helldivers. How old is Helldivers? Months. It came out February. It's almost half a year. Hey, guess what? People want to fucking play something else. And Helldivers is a game that has seen a lot of big updates, and obviously it had its bit of a rocky road there in the middle. And people want to very quickly try to attach, like, well, it never came back from that. Like, no, dude, the game is fucking 5 months old. People want to do something else. And there are still a lot of people playing Helldivers 2. It's not like it's fucking Battleborn where you're like, oh, I can't even get in a match. And again, like Helldivers 2 is not a live service game. It is a game that is live and is running and has updates and all this other stuff, but it is not being monetized quite the same way as a purely live service game. Like they're striking kind of a hybrid model here, and I feel like the updates they have had for that game are appropriate for the game that they're making. And so to see those articles and to see like, and not just articles, but, you know, social media and everything else, and like just to see the grinder come together and say like, well, this game's fucking dead in the water. It's like, no, motherfucker, it's like one of the best selling games of the fucking year, dumbass. Like, did it monetize that way constantly every month for the rest of all time? No. Did the people making it expect it to do so? I'm going to guess no. I'm going to guess at no point was PlayStation as the publisher of the game or as fucking Arrowhead, you know, that they're going into it going like, this is going to be the biggest game for the next 5 years. Like, no, dude. It's a relatively modest service game with some, you know, hooks here and there that you can spend some more money on if you so desire, but it's not so deeply attached to the raw nature of playing that game that it's the First Descendant, let's say, in the way that it is monetizing, or the way that they have attempted to monetize their player base beyond purchase. Which is good, because it's not a free-to-play game anyway, and whatever else. Like, dude, so to see, like, even games like that getting hit this way by people is just mind-numbing. Like, there's just a level of fucking... And I don't, you know... People got it right, man. Like, we're at a point now. Like, the game has changed. And it's not... And you know, it's not just social media. It's people writing articles that I feel like at some point in the past, the people writing those articles or the senior people above the people writing those articles would go like, no, like, don't write this or don't frame it this way, because you're framing it as if this was the expectation and that's not how video games work. Like, who is doing, you know, it just feels like a failure in the newsroom, if the newsroom still exists. That there is not someone a little more seasoned in there going like, dude, don't. Like, yeah, report on this, sure, if you want, but like, don't try to frame it as like, the game's a failure, the game's this, the game's that. Like, it's not a fucking, you know, this is not a fucking big deal. If the game was 1 week old and it had lost 90% of its players and it was hard to find a match, yes, that's absolutely there. Yeah, that sounds like a significant problem. But God, dude, like, we can't fucking keep, like, the CEO here of Hooded Horse, the publisher of Manor Lords, is, I think, deadly accurate here. Like, what the fuck are we doing? And why are fucking people, you know, like, you know, whether it's other game developers, which is what it was in this case, but you know, with other games, you see news articles going up on sites reporting similar type things about erosion of player bases. And erosion of player bases is a real thing, and it does happen, and sometimes it is worth writing about, but you got to fucking pick your fucking shots, man. And you got to make sure you know what you're actually fucking talking about, and that the metrics that you're referring to are fair and real. Which, again, concurrent players on Steam, I feel like that has been fucking shot full of holes a couple of different times now over the years of people going like, yeah, you could probably use that as a rough guide, but don't take it to mean that that's exactly how many people are online right this second. They don't run those queries fucking minute, every minute, right? I mean, that stuff feels like in some ways it is the video game version of in the wrestling. If you're talking about wrestling online, people get very focused on television ratings. They're just like, what? Why? Like it's 2024. You're writing about television ratings? Concurrents are not quite as fucking, concurrents are still the metric of the day. It is not like, that is not important for sure. And I think it sucks, man. What is the problem? So in this case, it's a game developer saying it on LinkedIn, and so it's just a fucking bad take from someone who might be a shitty business person. Like I don't know anything about Raphael van Leerup, the CEO of Hinterland. I don't know anything about him. But again, you do see these things coming out of social media, and you do see, like as they become talking points on social media, someone eventually goes like, well, I'm going to write this up for the website I work for, because people are talking. And I think you need to have a higher bar, or you need to have you need to try to fucking collect this shit in a way that makes sense. And I think that like responsibility when you're writing those articles is to sometimes say, hey, don't, like, yeah, people are talking about this. There's a way to report that without also piling on and being like, I don't know. Like, you're right. You don't know. It's okay to admit it sometimes. And whatever. I don't know. That's not going to change anything. Like this is going to keep going. This is, like people are going to in lack of with the lack of real metrics, people will use whatever they can. And that's the whole they'll take bad metrics over good metrics, or they'll take bad metrics over no metrics rather. And so they'll use what they can. And, this is as sales data has eroded in some territories because some publishers don't report the same way that they used to. And, you look at Circana, who reports a lot of that stuff. They're very quick to say, here's where our data comes from, and here's the methodology. And when you go and read that, you go like, oh, okay. That means this is a little bit less useful than I thought it was. But, like, now I know that. And now I know I can kind of like, all right. I can kind of figure that out. Nerokip asks, do you think the industry should open up the hood a bit more towards the community to reduce this kind of discourse? I think that at the end of the day, a lot of the community doesn't care. And I think that opening things up to the public, I used to think that was a really great way to kind of let people learn what it was really like. And let people learn how these decisions actually get made. And certainly transparency in journalism is something that you would think matters. But the thing you will find is that there's just parts of the audience out there that are just super fucking shitty. And they just want to fucking start shit and cause trouble and be weird. And they want to have their arguments, and they're not going to be swayed from their arguments. And I've experienced this time and time again for decades. And so, no, I think that like there's a percentage of people that really do appreciate that level of access, and they really do kind of learn something and take something away from those sorts of situations, be it an interview with someone who has like some really good nuts and bolts, not like salacious stuff, but just like, no, here's why we made the decisions on this game, and here's how we did, whether it's balancing or whatever else. People don't want to know why you balanced the game the way you balanced it. They want to know why the gun they like sucks today. Like, oh, they fucking ruined the game. Like, well, no, they don't want to hear why skill-based matchmaking actually is a good thing. They want to instead use that as a scapegoat for why they're bad at a game or whatever, or why their favorite streamer can't fucking do 360 fucking no scopes or, whatever the fuck. Like, they don't want the actual fucking answer to the question. And so I think that is the sad fucking truth. And I think that, we had a really good thing going in the mid to late 2000s, early teens, I suppose, where developers were more willing to have some of those conversations, and we were successful in getting PR teams that were not used to that sort of thing to loosen up a little bit and have some of those more technical discussions that really got more into just like, here's why it works. And nowadays, those people just get harassed off the internet again. And so they go, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to expose this person, this mid-level person on a game. We're not going to expose them to the internet at whole, because we're not going to do that to them because it's so shitty out there. And I can't help but look at it and go like, yeah, no, you're right. We worked for years trying to humanize game developers and get real stories out of them and get them to sit down and have interesting conversations and all of that sort of stuff. And I feel like we had a lot of them. And it's become harder, not easier, to do that because of the way the discourse works online now, because of the way that, social media works now and how, people get dragged for anything. You kind of just can't have those conversations the same way you used to. And so I'm chipping away at that and looking for the right way to kind of do my thing and get back to those kind of frequent interviews and all that sort of stuff. But like, the types of people that will say yes to that are a lot different now than it used to be. And it's a shame. It's a shame because I think that stuff is endlessly fascinating. I love to learn about shit like that, and I know that there were a lot of people that did too. But you kind of can't do it the same way because of just the tenor of, because of the way people are on the internet. And it's frustrating. It's very frustrating. But like, again, Tim Bender, publisher of Hooded Horse, is, I think, completely accurate here. Like, the idea that every single game needs to maintain its player base all the way through early access, that it's not going to have ebbs and flows based around new content or whatever. Like, people need to fucking relax. Some of these games, especially games that are in early access, some of these games are going to be marathons and not sprints. And some of these games are going to kind of ebb and flow. We'll see what happens with Manor Lords. I don't know. It's, again, like, I guess whatever happens with fucking Manor Lords, they've sold millions of copies of it. So presumably they have the funding to keep going on it for a good long time and achieve whatever it is they're hoping to achieve. But it's frustrating, like, to see games get billed as just straight up failures because someone is looking at some bad data player count number that doesn't even include consoles. That, like, just top to bottom, it's just a flawed. Like, these are very flawed takes, and you have to be able to kind of filter that stuff. I think you need to be, if you're writing reports like that, you need to have a lot of data around it to try to piece something together and make it into something that might actually make sense, or that there might actually be a trend here, or there might actually be something worth reporting. But I think, headlines that are like, Helldivers has lost 90% of his player base. Like, you're like, okay, that might be true, but that's also kind of just the Steam number, and We don't really know. And also, it's not that big a deal. Games come out, you play them, you stop playing them. It was like that forever. It should be that way more often than it is. And having that mentality, you are just kind of driving people into live servicing their games up even more because they're like, well, we gotta maintain a thing. Speaking of moving on from games, Mark Rubin, who is the face of XDefiant, Ubisoft's recently released first-person shooter, has basically said, yeah, if you don't like it, you can move on. If you're done playing it, you can go play something else. Like, yeah, hell yeah. But this comes in response to someone claiming that the game was rushed out, and so it's an interesting little bit of writing here that he threw up on Twitter here. Someone said that they felt it was rushed out, and his response is, rushed out, no. And this is, what we have is an engine that has only ever been an MMO. It is the Snowdrop engine, so it is the engine that was used for The Division, which I would not call an MMO. But that's a separate, dumber conversation that I don't want to have anymore. Anyway, what we have is an engine that has only ever been an MMO, and so all the infrastructure for a first-person shooter has had to be built up from the ground floor. Even Call of Duty started on id Tech, which was a shooter engine. Apex started on a shooter engine. But for us, we're working on developing all new tech and an engine that was designed for something else. That being said, the engine is really great, but it does require a lot of work. And with that work comes a lot of bugs that other engines have already worked out. We're not a shooter that's been around for 20 years. If you like what we're trying to do, stick around and you'll see things improve and new features get added. But if the game isn't for you, that's okay. You can move on. I think that's an interesting take. But I think it's interesting to, like, that's the EA complaint from 10 years ago, 15 years ago, about Frostbite. You know, when Frostbite, but it was kind of the other way around, where Frostbite was built for Battlefield, and then suddenly someone had to try to make a fucking Need for Speed game in it, and hijinks ensued. Oh yeah, so yeah, Snowdrop has been used for other things. Yes, yes. Jinarux in the chat says Mario and Rabbids was used for it. And the South Park game. So yeah, the work being done on those games probably did not help them much when it came to building a first-person shooter into that engine. And I bet that probably was a very heavy lift. As someone that does not have the technical know-how to do any of that, I'm sure that was fucking rough. But I guess, like, to that end, I would say maybe they should have picked a different engine. Of course, those are not things you know until you're in it already, and maybe that engine was forced upon them the same way it was forced on so many people at EA for a while there, because they didn't want to pay anyone else's engine licensing fees when they could just use the tech that they owned themselves. I have not seen a lot of chatter about XDefiant, so I can't tell you, like I don't know if it's a game that is very buggy or not. That's been the complaint that I've seen in a few spots since I started looking, is that it was kind of rough around the edges. They added Team Deathmatch. They put that in there. But I ultimately just don't think that I don't think the game is very good. It's not necessarily that it's in an engine that wasn't built for a shooter or whatever. I mean, you know, maybe that would have a knock-on effect there. I'm not coming away from it going like, man, this is buggy. I'm coming away from it going like, I don't think that this is especially fun. But still interesting that they, that he's out there kind of talking about those sorts of engine problems, because again, that was I don't know that they got out and said it publicly, but man, there was a good 2-3 years there that you could have a lot of conversations with people at EA that fucking really hated working in the Frostbite engine. It's my understanding is that Frostbite went a long way and that they ironed out a lot of that shit. But it was a similar situation where you're just like, okay, this engine's never done this before, and so we have to make it do it. And once we've made it do it, it'll be easier to do it again. But for now, we have to try to ship a driving game. And yeah, sure, this game had tanks before, but Exoprimal. Remember that game? I'll forgive you if you don't. It's Capcom's dinosaur shooter. Dinosaur shooter. It's a third-person shooter, kind of a class-based, hero-based sort of deal, where you're kind of competing against another team, but kind of more obliquely than directly. For most of the match, you're trying to complete tasks faster than the other team, and then maybe you clash in the middle and fight, or maybe you don't. It's kind of random, I guess. They went through their seasons of content, and they have announced that, they're just going to run it all again. That's their plan going forward. They kind of completed their content year, I suppose, and that season 1 content will roll back out. With the release of Title Update 4, all planned Exoprimal seasonal content is now complete. From July 11th, Season 1 returns, with subsequent returning seasons and content starting on the 1st of each month. And so they're just going to run their stuff again. That seems like an okay way to handle it, I guess. If you're like, oh, I didn't get this. Let's assume for the moment that you like Exoprimal and want it. You're like, oh yeah, there's something in season 2 that was really cool. There was an event there that was neat and an unlockable that I want to get. And so I'll have another shot at getting it. Like, okay. That seems like an okay way to handle it. I wonder how Capcom feels about Exoprimal. It's very tempting to say, well, there's no way they could feel good about it, but I ultimately, like, that was a game that launched on Game Pass. And I wonder if it did okay there or not, to where they kind of felt good about the overall endeavor. It just felt like such a... It just felt like very much like an also ran kind of deal. I don't know. Like it coming out, you're like, yeah, okay. Like it wasn't awful. I remember playing it and going like, there's, there's stuff about this game that looks neat in spots, and I like that big wet balls appear in the sky and then dinosaurs come falling out of them. Like, it's fucking weird. But then you were like escorting a payload and stuff, and I'm like, all right, I don't want to do this. Yeah, Dr. Funk in the chat says they knew what it was. Like, yeah, I kind of got the impression that the people involved in that game kind of knew. Like, yeah, I mean, they're not making the biggest game in the world, but like, good on them, I guess. I don't know. If you've got a Wii U, my advice to you is to plug it in occasionally and make sure it still works. There have been situations with a Wii U where if you leave it discharged for long enough, it will, I guess, I believe the memory can corrupt, as the eMMC can fail. And so you should try to make sure that your NAND does not get corrupted by powering it up every so often. You need to do this because you can't send it back to Nintendo anymore. They have ended support for the Wii U on the repairs front. This comes from videogameschronicle.com. They basically just said like, hey, we're out of parts. I don't think that they had thought that they would run out of parts this soon. But that stock has become more, last year they announced that once the stock of replacement parts ended that the service would conclude, but I think it ended up concluding a little bit faster than they thought. And so that's kind of like the last, like, oh yeah, sure, yes, if you want to go buy a NAND replacement kit and try to solder it in there yourself or whatever, there are ways to fix a Wii U, and if you were to accidentally brick it while doing something fucking weird to it, God forbid, yeah, there are presumably ways to unfuck that. But Nintendo will not be able to help you with that any longer because they have discontinued the Wii U repair support program. End of an era. I literally have my Wii U hooked up right now. This is literally, the tablet is sitting on the charging base right here. That's a Wii U sitting right there. It's plugged in. The unit, I have it plugged in. I don't have it hooked up to a TV because I can play Super Mario Maker without a television, and that's really the only thing I would want to play on it anyway. So yeah, I don't know. Keep your Wii U's close because you can't fix them as easily as maybe you used to. Also on the kind of end of service delisting front, Battlefield 3, 4, and Hardline are entering the process of being shut down. This is again from I guess this is from the official Battlefield Twitter account via Video Games Chronicle. Battlefield 3 will still be available for play on PC. Battlefield 4 and Hardline will still be available for play on PC, Xbox One, and PlayStation 4. So you'd still be able to play single player after November 7th of this year. They are going to take the games off of sale at the end of this month. So you have until July 31st if you are looking to buy a copy of Battlefield Hardline. And who isn't? But yes, the online servers will be taken down November 7th. As a part of this, they also said that the next season, or the current season, rather, of Battlefield 2042 will be the last season for that game as well. Battlefield Hardline was a very weird video game. It was a very controversial at the time because it's the Battlefield game where you play as cops, and you got more points in the single player for busting people than you did for shooting them, but also you would reach a level cap really quickly. And so when I played the single player, I just went and busted everybody. And I stopped getting like bonus XP or whatever it was that you were getting for it. I forget now, but it was like you would hit a level cap in some form. And I hit that like maybe halfway through the campaign. And so the rest of it, the idea of like playing as a good cop, like the reward system totally scaled the other way. I'm just like, oh, who cares? Like, yeah, I could make this harder and bust this guy, or I could just shoot all these people in the fucking face. One of my favorite weird EA stories that this is more of a joke than anything else, but my understanding is that it was a joke that someone did say out loud, because they're like, well, what if we just opened the game with like Mars current day? Totally, people were like, how could you make a game with cops? And how could you do this? And the cops are this and that. And so before the game came out, EA was feeling the heat a little bit from people about making a game glorifying the police and trying to make it like, oh, it's edgy cops. And so someone's like, here's the solution to the problem. Just say the game's set on Mars. And it's not Earth cops. These aren't Earth cops. It's a totally different situation. Hardline, yeah, Hardline's weird because like the multiplayer was like a smaller, like slightly smaller in scale than your average Battlefield game. Because of the nature of that, but then also it was bigger than you would expect for a game about cops, because you're like, oh, and you're like, oh, maybe this is realistic because now the cops have been super militarized, and yeah, I guess they do have all this fucking shit, don't they? But yeah, I don't know, like no one, I don't remember anyone ever being excited about Battlefield Hardline. I remember there being a pretty good fucking Spank Rock and Amanda Blank track on that soundtrack. And I remember being excited about that. And that is the only thing I remember being excited about when it comes to Battlefield Hardline. Battlefield 3 and 4, those were solid games, man. Battlefield 4... Is Battlefield 4 the last good Battlefield game that's still up and running? I mean, you know, like... You know, Bad Company 2 was before that. That was 2010. Battlefield 4 was 2013. I think the thing I remember about Battlefield 4 was feeling like it wasn't that different from 3. And feeling like having more fun with 3. Either way, they're both going to be shut down. And Battlefield 2042 is in its last season, so they've had a long time now to try to figure out what the hell is next for Battlefield. They put Vince Zampella in charge of that thing. They started a studio. They folded a studio. They have been spending a good long time trying to figure out what the fuck is next for Battlefield. When did 2042 come out? I feel like even that feels like ancient fucking history now. 2021. Oh, that's... Jeez. That's not that long ago, is it? Or was it 2021 on Steam and then 2020 elsewhere? That's just like the Steam date. No, 2021. November 2021. That feels like a much longer time ago than it is, but I guess I don't know. It's been a long 3 years. I remember 2042 at the time being like, oh man, this is gonna be them kind of fixing it. Like the last couple of games before that, they like the people seemed unhappy and whatever else, and 2042 was their chance to kind of get it back on track, and it feels like it sort of didn't. Or at launch, I mean, people were fucking furious about 2042, even though it was a fucking bucky weird mess. Remember, it had that weird custom game mode, and then people were hacking, you know, like making deliberately fucked up custom games so that they could level up super fast, and they had to patch that and figure that out. And I remember a lot of neat ideas in the old Battlefield portal that never seemed to quite pan out quite how you'd like. And then people got really mad about all the class-based stuff, and there was a bunch of weird bullshit attached to that, but they did eventually rework a lot of the player loadout building stuff and all that. Yeah, man, I cannot remember a time, and I guess it probably was like a decade ago now, but I can't remember a time when people were like, in a general sense, really happy with Battlefield. It's always been like, oh, some people are into what they're doing, or the people that stuck around long enough and didn't bounce off it in the first 6 months or 3 months, you know, they patched the game up and they kind of fixed it, and it's better now, you know. But I remember, like, God, like Battlefield 1, like people being super fucking pissed, and fucking 5 and just like all that stuff. But it was like Battlefield 3 probably, or 4. I mean, 4. I don't think people were mad about 4. I think people were like a little less enthused about 4 because it was like it came out only 2 years later and it wasn't that different and it launched weird. It was like that was the one that launched on that generation of consoles, right? That was the one that was like, I remember, goddamn dude, I think it was Battlefield 4. We didn't get invited to review events for the Battlefield games because EA was very aware of how we rated games. And they were very aware that they wanted a Metacritic 85. And so they knew inviting us, if they weren't confident that we were going to give their game 5 stars, then inviting us to their thing was a bad idea. And I cannot blame them. If those are the metrics that they turn on and that's how they get bonuses and that's how they get all their stuff, I'd be like, yeah, no, don't invite these guys. They're probably not going to give it a 5. Look at how buggy it is. But I remember hearing from the review event for 4 that like, oh, it's just crashing all the fucking time. Like we spent more time like hearing from people that were there to review the game and hearing that they were like, yeah, we pretty much just sat there while they were fucking with the servers and we could play one match, but the game crashed like every time at the end of the match. And so they would have to take everybody down. They would have to reboot some server, and then we would all have to join. Like it was excruciating. Was the tone of that thing, because like the game was so fucked up. And this is like a few weeks before launch, right? And so you're like, well, I mean, that's useless information anyway, because presumably it won't be like that when it really comes out. And it wasn't like that when it first came out, but it sounds like it did have its issues. So I don't know, man. I'm always going to be interested to see what Battlefield does next, even though I'll tell you, I don't think I've really loved a Battlefield game since 3. I don't think I've really loved a Battlefield game since 2. 3 is really good. And I had fun with 4 as well, but it was short-lived fun with some friends. And it wasn't like we were doing good. It was like we were getting in a car and driving around and being stupid. And it was super fucking fun. But like, even, the Bad Company games I think are amazing fucking like single player campaigns and the characters and all the writing and all that stuff. But like the multiplayer in those games I thought was fine. But man, Battlefield fucking 2. I just feel like if you and I don't like 1942, and I don't really care about Battlefield Vietnam. Like I know people love those fucking games. But I feel like if you were not playing games, but it's hard to get people to understand why someone would feel that way, I guess. But when you think about where games were at and where multiplayer games were at and the player counts and how all of that stuff worked and whatever else, I think it's really fucking hard to convey to like more modern players truly why Battlefield 2 is fucking amazing. And at the time, it was fucking mind-blowing. Like just how fucking good it was. Like it felt impossible. Yeah, Feastophile says BF2 felt like the future. It did. It felt like a game that shouldn't exist. You're like, I don't even know how the fuck we're doing this right now. But holy shit, we are doing this. Just a fucking amazing video game. And it hasn't really been like that since. I mean, obviously there have been great Battlefield games since then, but not that way. Like again, Bad Company 2, outstanding. People loved 1943 there for a while. That was the downloadable one that people got all fucking crazy about for like 4 months or something, and then that was that. But dude, Battlefield 2, just the way that game felt, the battlefield felt so fucking alive and full and crazy. In a way that like, in a way that like honestly like playing it it was this feeling of like, this is why PCs have to continue to exist, because you sure as shit can't do this on a console. And then, you know, obviously, like, you can, and in fact people do technically do that when it comes to player counts and map size and whatever else on a console. Like, you absolutely can do it, and you have been able to do it for a couple of generations now. Man, I don't know, whatever. All right, I'm sorry. Battlefield 2 is an amazing video game. I'm not saying go back to it, because I bet it is maybe not aged super well. Also, if it is still up and running, I'm sure anyone playing it now they are bad people. They are murderers. You are not going to have a good time. If it is still possible to play Battlefield 2 online, you'd probably have a fucking terrible time doing it. Oh, it's custom server software. Okay, yeah, all right, a bunch of janky weird shit. Speaking of janky weird shit, someone was goofing about Battleborn on the Discord yesterday, and I found myself Googling Battleborn because I love pornography with mushrooms in it. And so after I had my fill of that hobby grade pornography, so there is a custom server project. There are ways to, and it is not fully featured. It is not like you can't get out there and just play a full match of Battleborn. But apparently you can do like single player versus bots and some other stuff like that. Like they're making headway in making Battleborn playable once again. Someone's mentioning, yes, I did see that Lawbreakers also is having some sort of custom server sort of situation, but that was not up and running. Like, I don't want to join a bunch of fucking Discords. I like put a fucking link to a GitHub somewhere. Like, don't join the Discord to download the, like, no, man. Fucking put it somewhere. I don't want to join your fucking chat room to fucking download a file. But anyway, the Lawbreakers thing was like something that they ran it for like a test weekend and then shut it down or whatever else. And so I went through I reinstalled the Steam version of Lawbreakers, and I was like, I need to download the thing now. Where do I download the thing? Oh, a Discord? Like, all right, well, for Lawbreakers, I'll make an exception. Let's get on there and get it. And then it turns out that they were just having like a weekend beta thing, and it wasn't up and running 24/7. So I have not checked back on that to know where they're at. But yeah, presumably someone will be able to play Lawbreakers again someday, which is, that's something else. Yeah, we need a Syndicate custom server. We need to make that happen. We need a Marvel Heroes type of situation. Like, that's, we need Marvel Heroes. I guess City of Heroes. I know that that's like up and running somewhere, but I don't know where that got to. Anyway, that's going to do it for the news. Why don't we get into some emails here? podcast@guard.bike is the email address. You can send in an email to me. I will read it. I put forth the notion of, hey, do you think that some of these developers out of China or perhaps South Korea are looking to obfuscate who is actually developing and publishing the game because, you know, there's some perceived, whether it's a quality issue or a privacy issue or whatever about playing a Chinese video game. You know, maybe it's with TikTok going through whatever the fuck TikTok is going to go through or whatever. Do you think that there are publishers out there looking to hide that stuff? Like a Dave the Diver situation where, you know, that won like an indie game award despite very much not being an indie game. I had someone write in who is working in the video games business, and I'm going to leave all of the details out. In a way that probably makes this uninteresting, but it is someone who is writing in to very much say, yes, that is a very deliberate thing in at least, and I know of another situation where it was a very deliberate thing, but that is something that some of these publishers are looking to do to kind of obfuscate where these games are coming from and who they're coming from, because I don't know why. Like, you can jump to the conclusion and say like, oh, it's because of, you know, it's because they view that there is, whether it's like a, you know, an anti-Chinese bias, which I don't know that's, I don't think that's, I don't think it's necessarily that, or perhaps, I wonder if it's more that there's a thought that because of what's happening with TikTok and because of, you know, kind of where people kind of stand on China, with some of that stuff, that some of these companies are looking to kind of just obfuscate that as much as they can, to not have to have the conversation or whatever. But also, yes, in the case of like a Nexon, which is a Korean company, is it a situation where like the Nexon name is not, like, when I know that Nexon is making a game, I go, oh, okay. I have expectations about just how free to play it's going to be and what the monetization is going to be and what the quality is and whatever else. It's kind of why this the First Descendant thing is almost frustrating in a way, because qualitatively they're getting a lot better. They publish the finals. That is also them. Right? And so, but you know, every bit about the way the First Descendant is monetized makes good on those thoughts. Like, you look at the store in that, and you look at the name on the box. Let's assume there's a box for a minute here, and you go, oh yeah, that checks out. That's Nexon doing it up real Nexon style. That's Nexon doing a Nexon thing. And you could interchangeably, I think, drop in like Tencent there as well. And a number of other publishers kind of in that space. But like the finals is listed, the publisher there is listed as Embark Studios, the same as the developer, but I believe are they part owned by Nexon, or they just do a deal? Yeah, Embark is a subsidiary of Nexon. I don't know if the Nexon logo displays when you launch that game. When you go to the website for the finals, they don't go out of their way to hit you with the Nexon logo. It's at the very bottom of the page. It's not like they're straight up lying about it. I mean, plenty of publishers do that. Like, it's not it's not necessarily an indicator of how they're trying to present that game, but it is a different presentation than the First Descendant for sure, which is straight up listed as public. Well, let me actually double check on that, but I'm 99% sure I'm right there. Yeah, that's just listed as published by Nexon, developed by Nexon Games, and then in game there actually is a studio. It's like Magnum Studio or something that is presumably some internal Nexon team that did the development on the game. And I wonder, like, will that be a thing? Will there be more and more publishers that have that kind of, like, yeah, NCSoft is perhaps another one there. Yeah. Do they kind of have some of that stank on them a little bit, I suppose. Hoyoverse, I mean, but Hoyoverse is actually, I think in a lot of ways they've gotten by on quality, which is a weird thing to say, but yeah, yes, and Embark is, yes, the studio was founded by people who are ex-DICE people, but they are definitely funded by Nexon. There are a lot of studios out there like that. Like you saw some of the Blizzard, as people were getting out of Blizzard, and starting new studios, you would see a lot of them be like, we've founded a new studio devoted to making a AAA RTS or whatever. It seemed like a number of them had the same idea of like, no, we're going to make an RTS because that's what we wanted to make at Blizzard, and they wouldn't let us. and then somewhere a few paragraphs down, just be like, oh, by the way, this is a new Tencent studio. Yeah, Battle Aces. Who's that? Yeah, that is. I don't know if they're still running a thing, but I got a key for Battle Aces and didn't. Or like they were or are running some kind of beta. Yeah, Battle Aces is Lightspeed Studios, and then Lightspeed is Tencent, right? I mean, I believe that is one of those studios that, that if I scroll down this page far enough, there's eventually going to be a Tencent logo. Anyway, all right, whatever. Anyway, someone sent an email about that very topic, kind of confirming very much like, oh yeah, that very much happens, which is something I had heard but mostly suspected. And this person left enough receipts in the email to where I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, yep. Spent a long time Googling stuff on that one and going, oh Jesus. Andrew writes in from Seattle and asks, what was the state of PC gamepads during the era between the Gravis gamepad's relative ubiquity and the Xbox 360 controller becoming the de facto standard? Was Microsoft's Sidewinder series more or less the default? I was holding a Gravis pad and a few different Sidewinder variations in my garage earlier for the first time in many years, and I'm actually shocked they shipped some of those things. Everyone likes to talk about the weird peripherals, but were they actually good PC gamepads? Or sorry, were there any actually good PC gamepads in the late 90s or early 2000s that you remember, or was it mostly a lawless wasteland of cheap crap with dodgy drivers? Yeah, it's the... yeah. I mean, at some point, I went from a Gravis gamepad to the kind of default Sidewinder gamepad, and then eventually I wanted... It didn't have triggers, but like there's the other weird one, the other Sidewinder that had like gyro support and had a weird scroll wheel in the middle of it that I want to say it had triggers. And so it was like 6 on the face and 2 triggers, if I remember right. And I remember moving to that around the like Midtown Madness, Motocross Madness era or something. No, if you're looking for just like, if you're talking straight up D-pads on a gamepad, none of those were great. But those were all Sidewinders. It's what's the name of the there's like the standard Sidewinder, and then there's the other fucking thing. It was more of a it's the Freestyle Pro from 98. The Microsoft Sidewinder Freestyle Pro is, I believe, what we're looking at here. Let me try and load this up real quick. Yep, that's the one. I eventually started using a Sidewinder Freestyle Pro for a while. I believe because it had triggers. I think that was the only reason. It also had a tilt mode that was built, you know, for like driving games, or Motocross Madness, I believe is what it came with. But it was also kind of like, hey, the existing Sidewinder is nearing its end of life here. We need to get something, and so that was kind of the next step in Microsoft's controller story. They're all just fucking weird. The regular Sidewinder I thought was okay for what it was. It doesn't feel good in the hand, but nothing did then. And, you know, I don't think we were as keyed in / precious about controllers as we are now. Because I think we just have so many better choices these days. That, you know, someone finally made a good controller, and now we know ergonomically, that a lot of the stuff that came before it was pretty terrible. But yeah, I used a Sidewinder for a lot of stuff, and yeah, driver issues and just like getting, it wasn't even drivers per se, it was just like getting games to recognize that shit, especially when a lot of games were still built for the Gravis gamepad. Like getting the Sidewinder to work was often a nightmare. And eventually that stuff kind of started locking in a little bit, and games started working a little bit more frequently, and just, you know, you had to fuck with them a little bit less. But yeah, it was a wasteland, but also like the number, or I guess like the percentage of games on PC that you wanted to use a gamepad with was like kind of low still, you know. It was still very much a mouse and keyboard kind of place, unless you were playing mech games. I mean, Microsoft did have its big like force feedback joystick that was kind of fucking sick, to be honest. And you could play Mech Warrior, I want to say it was 3 that came with that. I don't think it was 2. And that thing was cool, but like only for a small number of games and flight sims and whatever else. And you know, you used a mouse and keyboard for most of your games because you were playing first person shooters or real-time strategy games, the 2 genres that mattered. And then MMOs came along and you wanted to use a mouse and keyboard for that. And so like gamepad support being dog shit on a PC wasn't that big of a deal because you didn't expect it to fucking work, man. I remember being really blown away by the PC ports of Mortal Kombat 1 and 2 because they were very good ports of the game, and also the fucking gamepad worked. And you know, it's only a 4-button gamepad, so you still, the punches got reduced from 2 buttons down to 1 is how they made that work. But you know, like, yeah, people were designing for a mouse and keyboard, and it just wasn't, you know, it wasn't always like that big of a deal. And you know, like, yeah, emulators and stuff were starting to happen and whatever else, but like, you know, that stuff was, you know, no one was building controllers to work well in MAME at that point in time. So it wasn't really until USB had a few years under its belt, and then, you know, by the time we got to 05, you know, like the thing to remember, I guess, is like in line with all of the gamepads sucking shit. And you could argue that this is maybe some kind of chicken and egg situation. But you had, like, the controllers were not good. The games were not built with controllers in mind. PC ports of console games, a lot of the time, were just fucked. They didn't work right. They didn't look as good. They ran shitty. They were just funky, unless they took time to do the fucking work. And it's because there was no universal controller, so like developers just had to walk into the Wild West on the controllers and go like, what do people use? What do people use to play video games on this thing? Oh, a mouse and keyboard? Shit. Well, I guess we have to support that. I mean, should we support gamepads? I guess we could. Which ones can we support with the time that we have? And so just a lot of games didn't support them properly, and they were just fucked, man. PC ports were fucking terrible for a real long time. And the Xbox 360 controller, you know, like, you got to give Microsoft all the credit in the fucking world there in that specific arena. Because with that thing coming out, that thing being USB, them finally, you know, like X input coming along, and all of that stuff being rolled into Windows and just fucking working for a change. Like, that stuff made everything else possible. When it came to developers going like, okay, cool, we'll just support this because it's Microsoft's official controller. It's the same one we're supporting on console, so our control schemes come in, and everything we can just do it. It's just fucking done. And they didn't have to think about that end of it so far. And that alone raised the quality of PC ports by like a huge, huge margin. Because you just didn't have to dick around with it as much anymore. And that was fucking awesome. And then, obviously there were still obviously technical issues and some of the other stuff not related to controllers. It was shitty for a while, and then it got really good for a while, and now it's, I don't know, it's maybe a bit of a crapshoot again. Some of these PC ports are shipping a little funky, which is a shame because for a while it felt like we had a golden age there where like the PC ports shipped solid. They usually ran better. And you're like, this is the fucking way in the light, man. This is great. This is easy. But that's, there still are plenty of fucking games out there. Yeah. Yobray says we're due for an X Input 2 to support new controller features in a standard way. Absolutely. Well, I mean, sure. Actually, yes. I think that like something that opens up more buttons to be accessible is good. Steam and Valve has really picked up the torch, I think, in a big way on controller stuff, like what they've done with big picture mode and some of the stuff they're doing more recently with like Steam Input, which is fucking amazing. Like when you think about what they're doing under the hood to, you don't have to fucking go download weird fucking fake drivers for your DualShock 4. Steam just sees it and goes, nah, you're good. You're all right. And it's amazing to see that in motion. And I love that, but it's not as good as it. There's still some games that are either lying to Steam, or I don't know what the deal is, because what Steam added is they allow developers to flag what they call like new controller support, I guess, or like what support for current controllers, and they have if you look on the store pages for these games, or I guess on the library pages. They have a box on the right side now that'll say that says, hey, controllers not supported. This game wasn't designed to support controllers. Here's another one that says mostly playable with your controller. This game supports your controller, but you're currently remapping it via Steam Input and may see incorrect glyphs. So what that means is, because I have a PlayStation 5 controller hooked up, a DualSense Edge specifically. And so what that should mean is I can go turn off Steam Input and it will natively read my PS5 controller, but it doesn't. Sometimes that is wrong. And I've run into a number of games where it says like, oh yeah, this supports your controller, but you're using Steam Input. So you're going to see Xbox buttons in game because Steam Input always maps everything to Xbox buttons, generally speaking. And it doesn't work. Even games that say like, oh, that should work. And I will try this. I'm curious about the First Descendant. Give me another year and a half saying the name of this game and maybe I'll get it right. Or maybe I just won't have to. We'll see. And we'll see if it changes to PlayStation glyphs in game. I do like that we are using the word glyphs, and that has been used for years and years. But to see it forward facing like this, I like it. I like it. But then so if I go into First Descendant and go into controller settings and I disable Steam Input, it should now just say, oh no, it just says, okay. Now instead of saying you're using Steam Input, now it just says it may show incorrect glyphs, meaning they did not put PlayStation glyphs in the game, which I always find weird because they made a PlayStation version of it, but perhaps doing the work to make the appropriate glyph appear, I'm sure that at some point that's not worth it. at some point it's probably easier just to tell PlayStation players, hey, fucking memorize where the Xbox buttons go. It's not that big a deal, which is what I do, and it's fine. Yeah, but gamepads are fucking weird. At the end of the day, PC gamepad stuff is ridiculous. We'll probably close with this one. Thanail from Ireland writes in, kind of in the wake of the Dr. Disrespect happening, the Dr. Disrespect stuff happening. Says, in light of recent news about Dr. Disrespect inappropriately messaging a minor, do you remember when a 36-year-old John Romero married a Romanian teenager he met online when she was under 18? Barely anybody mentioned it then or since. Have standards changed as video games have grown up? I do remember this. I had forgotten about this, but yes. I do remember hearing about this. That like, and it was like something that he was like writing about freely in like a blog or something about like, I'm finally going to Romania to meet so and so, and that they ended up they ended up getting married, and yes, I do remember that there this Jerry Seinfeld-esque situation. I don't remember the specifics of it. I would have to look it up, but yeah. So the Thanail here is saying that they got married. They are not still married. But I do remember at the time there was a while there that, kind of post Ion Storm that like you don't really remember Romero doing a lot. Like he was still kind of around, but he wasn't like actively working at studios or actively, and I seem to remember this probably happening around then when it wasn't like he was out of games, but maybe he wasn't necessarily making a lot of games, but I could be wrong on the timing on it. But I do remember this happening. I don't remember the specifics of it. That sounds gross. Ugh. But I don't remember the specifics. Okay, people are starting to look it up. 2004. Okay. And so yeah, like Romero was at Midway for a while there, making that Gauntlet game, I think. And I'm trying to like line up what the time frame of this is, but yeah, they are no longer married. He has since married Brenda Romero. But yes. Ugh. Now I need to take another email because I don't want to end on that one. But yeah, yes, to answer your question, did standards change? Whatever else, I don't know that's. I don't know. I don't know what the situation there was, but I remember that he was not necessarily in the public eye a lot, kind of post Daikatana, really. That Romero was, kind of he was a, like post Daikatana, he had become a bit of a laughing stock there for a while. And so this coming after that, I think that people were just not really thinking about Romero for a while there. And so I don't know the specifics of that situation. It was not something I was, you mentioning it, I do remember now that happened and that people were kind of clowning on it. But I don't, Steve from Royal Oak, Michigan writes in and says, now that the Video Games Chronicle podcast is regularly doing energy drink reviews, I was wondering if you have beef with them for infringing on your territory. Those motherfuckers. No, my greatest regret about Summer Game Fest is that I had some energy drinks here that I was going to pass Jordan's way to get them out of here more than anything else. I was like, oh God, let's get someone else to fucking drink them. And because I ended up being sick, I never made it. So, so I still have some drinks set aside for him at some point. They're over there doing there's a whole different class of energy drink happening over there. So no, I'm excited. I'm excited. What good is science if you're not peer reviewing it? I say. So, good on them for everything they're doing. Let's take this last one from Rowan. I've noticed something about the Concord preview coverage. Concord. We're writing previews about Concord, California. I'm never going to get over that, and I wish I could, but I'm never going to. Concord, the PlayStation published game coming up. That Concord. Not a fast jet, and not the city of Concord. Anyway. I've noticed something about the Concord preview coverage I'd like to hear your opinion on. Within the preview coverage I've read or listened to, Concord's ability to go the distance as an ongoing service has been questioned. However, those doubts don't seem to be tied to the quality of the game, but more the gaming landscape at large and happenings within the industry as a whole. Do you think this is a fair discussion to be having in the context of a preview? You said in the past you should always try to give the benefit of the doubt when previewing a game, and I wondered how you felt about this. I think that this is for a lot of the reasons we just talked about with the last Descendant, the First Descendant. You're going to be investing, like these games are going to ask a lot of you in terms of time. Concord maybe less so than First Descendant. Based on what I do know about the game, which I have not seen the game, so I have not previewed it myself. I will say. But the thing you have to kind of figure out is like, okay, if you're going to buy this game, are people going to be playing it 6 months from now? When we get into these multiplayer games and get into these conversations, like you are making an investment in a game that is not a free-to-play game. And so you kind of have to at least sort of think about it. It's passing judgment on it right here and now, I would not support. But opening up that conversation right now in the preview phase, I think is worth it. Like if you're going to see it and go like, yeah, it's neat. Are you going to drop your other multiplayer games to play that instead? Are enough other people going to do that to where you'll find a match 6 months from now? It's neat, but I think what I hear when that sentiment is expressed in a preview is I hear this game's all right, but that might not be enough to go the distance in this day and age. In today's modern industry, that's not enough. There were people who liked Brink as well. And they should get a game clam. But yeah, I think it is fair to have that conversation in a sort of open way, and not necessarily in a final judgment kind of way. But yes, I think that if you're going to be asked to spend money on a video game and buy it outright, you kind of have to at least think about it. You kind of have to at least go like, yeah, if I'm going to buy this game, and you could argue that that's self-defeating, that games could fail on the basis of people overthinking that purchasing decision because they're sitting there going like, well, I'm not going to buy this if it's going to be dead in a month. But maybe it will be dead in a month. It's totally possible. Right? I don't say that based on the quality of the game or otherwise. Like I said, I've seen what you've seen. when it comes to Concord. I don't know. I will tell you from the outside of it, looking in at it, I look at it and go like, and this is something I felt from that initial trailer, and then the follow-up stuff that I've seen since then hasn't really, gotten me off of this, but I look at it and go like, I don't know that this is something that's going to compete with. I think there are other games doing this from a gameplay perspective or close enough to this that people are already invested in. And I don't know that enough players will drop that game to play this one instead. And if they do, will they stay there? I don't really see it. I've heard it's fun. I've heard good things. Rumbleverse was awesome too. Radical Heights was neat too. Some people liked Brink. So I don't know. It's bad to have these conversations. It doesn't feel good. It's annoying to feel like, oh, I have to think about this longer term than just, hey, this game looks cool and I want to play it. I instead have to think about it in terms of like, oh, this game looks cool, and if I want to play it, I better play it right now because I don't know that there'll be anybody here in 6 months. That doesn't feel good. Doesn't feel good at all. Anyway, that's going to do it for the show. Thanks everybody for hanging out. We'll be back next week with another episode of the podcast. And of course, we'll be streaming some games this week. I don't know. If I still haven't gotten the First Descendant out of my system, perhaps I will stream some of that. We'll see. I don't know. Maybe we'll do some of that tomorrow. Get some drops. Don't use the word gotcha. No, I don't know. And Friday we'll rank some 8-bit Nintendo games. So come on through. We'll see some things. Take care of yourselves.